Doktor nama apa ni Amir?
Dr. Husna. Alright, thank you. Right. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My dear brothers and sisters, welcome back to our program. It has been 11 weeks we have been together. So may Allah bless our effort in seeking His knowledge and also accept it as a form of ibadah. Inshallah, today, this Sunday, we're gonna have another 4 sessions. So the first 1.5 hours, we'll be spending to listen to our dearest Dr. Husna on externality and circular economy. And then later on after the break, we'll have Dr. Muhammad Irwan to speak on public finance. Right, so before I pass the floor to Dr. Husna, let me read her details for us to get to know a little more about her, right? So Dr. Husna received her PhD from Australian National University. At the moment, she teaches various of courses for both undergraduate and also graduate level. She is our dearest academic advisor at our department. Okay, she has been serving as the academic advisor for 5 years already, and also a fellow member of our Center for Islamic Economics. In terms of research, her research interests are in resources and environmental economics, environmental impact valuations, and also socio-economy issues. She is currently working on waste management and circular economy by applying Maqasid Sharia framework. In 2014, she received a grant from Australian Mining Organisation. So inshallah, given her expertise, she will be the right person to talk on externality and also circular economy. Dr. Husna, we are excited to learn from you. So with that, I would like to pass the floor to you. Let me share the slide. Give me 1 or 2 minutes to prepare for that. Okay, Dr. Husna, I think you can start.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Zara. Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Well, a very good morning to everyone. So I'm so excited to see you all. Okay, so for today's topic, we will be discussing on externalities and circular economy as mentioned by Dr. Zara. Dr. Zara, can you please scroll down for the next slide? Okay. So the learning objective of today's discussion is to learn a few concepts in environmental issues, particularly focus on externalities. Okay, there are actually many types of environmental issues, but we just want to focus on externalities to understand the types, measures, and solution for externalities. And the next one is to know the impacts of externalities on sustainability, to expose to a new approach, which is what we call circular economy, to achieve sustainability. And the last one is to share a case study on the applications of circular economy. Okay, next. Okay, so let me minimize this first. Okay, so let's start with the market systems. I believe that everyone have learned this in the previous lecture, right? Taught by Prof. Salama and Dr. Naha. So we'll just have a recap on these concepts. Okay. So under market system, we have consumers and producer. So you know that consumers are very rational and they are motivated by self-interest to maximize their utility, what we call their satisfaction, given their budget constraint. While producers are also very rational, they are motivated by their self-interest or their goal to maximize their profit, given their costs and then the resources availability. So if you can see the diagram on your right side, okay, you have the price and the quantity of good. Okay, so basically the demand curve, which you can see in the black line, the demand curve is actually downward sloping. So you know that why it is downward sloping, because when the price is high, basically the quantity demanded is lower, while when the price is low, because it is cheap, so people will demand for it more. Well, the opposite true is for the supply curve, which is upward sloping. Why it is happen? Because when the price is high, the firms or the producer are willing to supply more, because a high price means high profit for them. So the intersection between supply curve and demand curve, you will get market equilibrium. Okay, so this is the case of perfect competition. But do you think that perfect competition is a perfect system, although it is desirable by the capitalist system? Well, basically, I beg to differ, because this system basically does not respect the constraint that we have. What is our constraint? So remember, we only have one Earth, right? So but then in economics, basically our wants are unlimited. We want so many things. We want to purchase this, we want to purchase that, so many things. That's why we call our wants are unlimited. But the resources available on Earth are very limited. So what happened? What happened when we have this kind of clash? Unlimited one and then limited resources. Of course, we will be exploiting the resources to the max. Of course, we will have the problems of resource depletion. We will have the problems of biodiversity loss. We will have the problems of various types of pollution. So this is what we call market failure. So I will be explaining the terms of market failure in the next slide. Okay. So for your information, finite resources, or what we call limited resources that we have, underpin economic activities that worth about 125 trillion US dollar. So basically the resources, the natural resources have a huge value, economic value, but normally we didn't really take it for, we take it for granted. Okay, so next. Okay, so as I mentioned to you, I will explain the concept of market failure. Okay, what is it? It occurs when the allocations of goods and services by the free markets, or what we call perfect competition market, is not efficient. So we know, even though we call it perfect competition market system, but it is not perfect. Remember that. So the examples of market failure, we have missing markets, public goods, externalities, which we will be focusing today, inadequate property right, imperfect information, and imperfect competition. There are actually many types of market failure, but for today's discussion, I will only want to focus on externalities, because we don't have time to explain all this kind of market failure. Okay, so if you look at the picture on your right side, okay, when I first look at it, I was kind of wondering, what is it? Is it a road like that full of rubbish? Well, it is not. So this is the condition, the case of Ciliwung River in Jakarta. It is actually a river, but then because people don't really care about it, because this river has no property right. Okay, so people can do whatever they want to this river. They can just pollute the river, do whatever. Okay, because no one will sue them, no one will scold them if they did this. But then, if they know that this river will have the value, economic value, if they know that this river will give their community, um, Sister Munawar, I get, yeah, okay. If they know that this river will give them benefit, so basically, they will get something out of it. For example, if let's say this river is clean, of course they will get peace of mind because of the river. On top of that, if let's say the river is clean, there must be habitats inside the river, for example fish, so they can also enjoy the benefits of eating fish. Okay, and but then this is just the examples of externalities, which is negative one. Okay, next one, Sister, Dr. Zero. Okay, so what is this externality? This is like economic terms. So let me just define it first. The spillover effects associated with productions or consumption that extend to a third party outside the market. So to make it simple, well, when we talk about externality, basically you have a transaction, economic activities with your friends. Okay, you and your friends are, for example, you are selling goods to your friends. So your friends will get the goods, the benefits of the good, and then you will get something like the price or profit from selling the goods. So if let's say the effects of your transaction affect the third party, which has nothing to do with your transaction, that is what we call externality. Okay, so this third party has nothing to do with your transaction, but they are affected because of your transaction or action. Okay, we call it externality. Okay, so basically there are two types of externality. First, we call it negative one. Second, we call it positive externality. In economics, normally when they talk about externality, normally they will refer to negative externality. Why is that? So if you look at the definition, it is an external effects that generates cost to the third party, while the positive one, the external effect that generate benefit to the third party. So of course, when the third party receive the benefit, they will be happy of receiving it, right? They will not complain. But then, if let's say they receive the cost, they will be unhappy. That's why we always talk about negative externalities, although externality can have positive and negative. So why externalities happen? Okay, it occurs when the property rights are not well defined or enforced, or transaction costs are not small. For example, if let's say you have a factory and this factory is actually releasing toxic air pollution, and it affect many people. So basically, because it affects many people, and if let's say the factory want to compensate people, want to somehow pay the medical expenses for people, so basically this company has to involve huge costs. So when I said transaction cost, it refers to the cost incurred by the company, or perhaps by the firm, perhaps by the people. Okay. Okay, next one. Okay, basically there are four types of externalities. The first one is the externality arise from consumption and also affect consumption. It can also arise from consumption but affect production. It can also arise from production, affect consumption, and production. Okay, so what is it? Okay, let's start with the first one. Externalities that arise from consumption that also affect other people's consumption. Okay, you can just ignore the function because this is for economists, they can read it like it's easy for them to read in mathematical term, but you can just simply ignore it. Okay, so remember this, the first type is consumption affect consumption. One person consumption affect another person's consumption or utility. Okay, when I talk about utility, I refers to people's satisfaction. Okay, so the example is that a person B is smoking a cigarette, but then he's affecting another person or person A. So basically, person B is enjoying the cigarette, right? So he's having high utility because he's enjoying his cigarette. But because of his consumption, he is affecting person A. Perhaps person A is enjoying the food, but then because of that cigarette, person A is kind of consuming the food together with the cigarette. So person B is actually affecting person A. Okay, so basically person A has nothing to do with person B, but then because of person A's consumption, A is affected. A satisfaction is affected. Okay, next one is consumption affect production. So the example is that, for example, a person A is listening to a loud music, and then because of this loud music, it affects the productions of person X. For example, person X is actually cooking or baking, but because of the loud music, so person X cannot concentrate, and somehow it affects the quality of the cakes or the baking process. Okay, so the next one is production affect consumption. So when we talk about externalities, normally this is the case. This is the normal situation. Okay, so production affect consumption. For example, you have a factory that somehow release toxic or release chemical substance to the air or to the river. So this company or this factory is actually affecting person A, affecting the welfare, the utility of people. Means that person A will be affected, will be sick, will become sick because of this pollution. This is the common types of externalities around the world. Okay, the last one is production affect production. If you can see my example, that is actually the examples of positive externalities. For flowers at the farm for Y benefit productions of X. It means that you have two farms, you have two producers. The first producers is actually planting flowers. The second producers is actually perhaps selling honey. So of course, the producer that's selling honey will benefit from the producer that are planting flower, right? So this is what we call positive externalities. But we can always come up with the negative types of externalities where production affect production. For example, um, we have the what we call we have like industrial area or industrial sites, right? There are so many factories, and this factory releasing what we call releasing releasing pollution into the river, and this pollution affect the the income of fishermen. Remember, the river is the source of income for fishermen. So here we can see that productions of the factory affect the productions of the farm, the fishermen. Okay, so next one. Okay, so how to measure this externality? How we want to quantify it? We know that are not good. So how we want to put a price on it? How we want to value it, right? So we know that environmental quality or environmental good. When I say environmental good, I'm referring to clean air. I'm referring to the land. I'm referring to forests. I'm referring to river, ocean. So how can we want to measure the externalities on them? Means that if let's say they are polluted, how can we quantify these effects? Okay, even though environmental goods have no market, do you think that it has no value? Do you think that they don't have price? Of course they do have values, right? If let's say your clean air is polluted, will you be affected? Of course you will be affected heavily, right? So even though there is no specific physical market for this environmental good, but their value is actually unmeasurable. Their value are like priceless. Okay, why do you think that public goods, not public good, environmental goods are valuable? Because they act as resource based. So these are some of the functions of environmental good. They act as resource based. What is it? Resource based means we get the input from them. For example, you get the what we call you get the fish from them. You enjoy the fish. You get the rice from the environment. You get so many types of food from the environment. That's what we call resource based. They are the resource source of our resource. Okay, they also provide amenities based or service. What is amenities based? It means that you will get a direct source of utility, direct source of satisfaction. For example, you have this kind of such a very nice scenery. Does it affect your utility? Of course, you will feel so happy. You will enjoy your time with your family. You will get peace of mind by spending your time in waterfall or in such a very nice beach in the mountain area. So basically, environment will give us this kind of utility or peace of mind. Okay, so environment also act as waste disposal. For example, for consumer or producer, when we consume something, when we produce something, we will generate waste, and environment will act as the waste disposer. And the last functions of the environment is that they will provide us life support function or life support system. For example, A, the one that we can breathe in, water, we consume it every day. So these are the main functions of environmental good. Okay, now we know that they are very important for us. So how can we value them? How can we measure them? So there are two types of valuation. The first one is market valuation. The second one is non-market valuation. So market valuation is very common, means that you can value them in the market, means that they have a physical market. What is the examples of it? For example, when you talk about natural resources, which is timber, right? So timber uh, can be sold in the market, and then they can put price on it, right? Because, well, if let's say the timber is very useful, so there is high demand on the timber, so the price will be high. If let's say people don't really like to use timber, they will use other alternative, perhaps it will affect the price of timber. So you have the market for that kind of natural resources. Okay, so we don't have to worry about it, because the price normally will act as a signal. So if let's say you have a problem, scarcity of timber, then it will be reflected in terms of the price. So don't worry. The one that we have to concern is that non-market valuation. The resources that cannot be marketed, means that there is no specific market for them. Okay, so if let's say you are dealing with this non-marketed good, so you have two methods to evaluate them, to value them. The first one, we call it reveal preference. The second is stated preference. So I'll start with the reveal preference. So basically, by the words, you can see reveal preference. It means that their preference are revealed, are exposed in the markets. So you just have to look at the existing market, and then you will see their behavior will tell you whether they prefer something, whether they prefer this good or that good. Okay, let me just give you one simple example. For example, you have your clean air is polluted. So what happened? When you want to breathe in, then it will give you some health problem, right? You will get cough or whatever. So because you believe that the air is polluted, so normally people will purchase a mask. So the act of purchasing mask tell us that, well, people actually react that the air is polluted, so they do something to protect themselves. So basically their actions are revealed in the market. Okay, that is the examples of reveal preference. Okay, there are a few types. Basically there are many, I just list down a few examples of reveal preference. So the first one, we have travel cost. What is it? For example, you have this industrial site, so many factories. Okay, so normally people don't want to pass through this area, right? Because you know that if you have many factories around that area, so the traffic jams are always the problem. And then you know that in the industrial site there are so many pollution, so you will try to stay away from it. You will try to divert from passing through that area, even though you know that by passing through that industrial area, you will arrive in your office quickly. So the cost of diverting from passing through that area is called as travel cost. Means that the cost is actually reflecting, measuring the impacts of externalities. This is the first method. Second, we call it hedonic price. Okay, so for your information, hedonic price is always measured using tangible asset, for example, land price or house price. So let me give you the examples of house price. Okay, so if let's say your house is actually located close near to the dumping site or landfill, so your house price will be lower compared to the price of house which is far away from that dumping site. So the difference in terms of price is actually reflecting the cost of externalities, reflecting the value of externalities. Okay, so the next one, I hope that I'm not going too fast. The next one, we call it averting expenditure. So this is the examples of purchasing masks. Okay, for example, you know that, let me just give you the recent example. We know during COVID-19, okay, we believe that our air is polluted, like contaminated by viruses. So we are so scared of breathing in the public air, right? What we did is that we purchased the mask. Okay, the cost of purchasing masks to protect us from getting infected by the virus are actually called as averting expenditure. So this is the cost of externalities. Okay, the last one, production function technique. So here you want to examine how the change in environmental condition affect productions or costs. Okay, so a simple example for production function technique is that if let's say you are suffering from the impacts of climate change. So you know that there are many types of many examples of climate change impact. Okay, one of the example is that the temperature become warmer and warmer. So because of this, it may affect the productions of one particular farmer. So what they did is that perhaps the farmer will try to purchase fertilizer, whatever method to actually protect or to actually kind of make sure that the crops are fertile. So the cost of actually protecting the crops is is called as externality cost. Okay, this is just one simple example. Okay, so I'll go to the stated preference. If you can see the term, it mentions stated, means that your preference for having a particular good are stated. Okay, normally we use survey-based questionnaire. So in this case, you know that environmental good like clean air have no markets, right? So we try to kind of create a hypothetical market to measure, to value people preference on having environmental good. For example, we ask them, how much are you willing to pay for having a better environmental quality? So people will state their preference, will tell, perhaps I'm willing to pay 5 ringgits, $5. So they are stating their preference. Okay, so there are two types on under stated preference. First, using contingent valuation method. So this is just a survey based asking how much they are willing to pay for the improved environmental quality. And the next one is choice experiment. So choice experiment is the advanced methods of contingent valuation method, because normally there are so many what we call complaints, so many what we call shortcomings of contingent valuation. So they kind of introduce a new one, the advanced one, that somehow solve the issues of contingent valuation. So people are presented with a few choices, and then they have to choose among one of them. Okay, so I will not explain the details because this is just to expose to you the methods in valuing, in measuring the environmental good. Okay, next, Dr. Zara. Okay, so let's look at the solution if let's say we have this kind of externalities. Okay, so normally for economic students, when we talk about externalities, we have market failure. So they simply said that, well, when we have market failure, government should intervene to correct the market. We know that the market cannot function well, cannot function in efficient way. So government should intervene. Government should play the role of correcting all this problem. But is it true? No, that's not right. That's not correct. Okay, so you have to kind of remember, I put a notes there. I put a notes, if you can see on your left side, on the top one, government can intervene only if the expected net present value, you can just ignore that. That is just like the economic term. Government can only intervene if the benefits of intervention are greater than the cost. Okay, so even though the externalities are present in the market, but government can only intervene if the benefits are larger. If let's say the benefit is small and the cost of intervention is huge, it is not efficient. Okay, it is not efficient. You are wasting your resources. You are wasting your money. Okay, remember that the intervention is only justifiable if the benefits are larger. Okay, so now let's see what are the a few solutions when we are facing externalities. So the first one is that regulation. So this is the case that when government want to intervene. So in economics, we call it command and control. So this is the term. What does it mean by command and control? So you know that, well, government will command, means that government will set a policy. For example, government think that the use of mercury in production is dangerous, is harmful to the environment, right? Mercury is very harmful. So government said that, well, we want to ban the use of mercury as an input in the production. So what happened is, so that is the command, that is the policy set by the government. And after giving the command, government will control. Control here means government will monitor. So by setting that kind of policy, what happened? Does it affect the profits of the company? Can the company adjust with that? So government will try to control, try to monitor the impacts of their policy or commands. That is the first method to solve the externality. Second, we can also use market-based approaches. Okay, so there are three types. We have price-based, quantity-based, and market facilities. So price-based is just like governments ask the firms to pay tax. If let's say you produce pollution, then just pay tax to me. As simple as that, right? Or perhaps government can also implement or give subsidy. For example, government said that, okay, if let's say you purchase this kind of green technology normally will reduce the pollution released by the firm. So government think that, well, the use of technology, green technology is useful to reduce the pollution. So what government did is that, okay, if you purchase this kind of machinery, green technology, you will get 20% subsidy or discount. Okay, so depends whether government want to use tax or subsidy. And then we also have quantity-based approach. Okay, means that government set a cap. Okay, so for example, you have two firms. Government said that maximum you can only produce 100 tons of pollution, for example. So government already set the quantity. You can only pollute up to 100 tons of pollution. And then you have two firms. And then government said that each of the firm will, they give the permit. Permit here means that the permit to pollute. So each of the firm will get 50 tons of pollution. Okay, so you have to remember different factory, different company, different firm going to have different technology. Okay, if the company has a better technology, so they can actually pollute less because their technology can reduce the emission. Some company who don't have good technology or all kind of machine, they cannot they may tend to pollute more. Okay, so the examples of quantity based is like emission trading scheme. Means that, okay, government has given the permit, so 50 to company A and 50 to company B. For example, company A has a good technology, so perhaps instead of polluting up to 50 tons of pollution, company A perhaps can pollute up to 10 tons. So company A has a surplus of 40 tons, while company B is an old company, they don't have the technology, good technology, so they cannot really reduce their pollution. So they may exceed 50 limit set by the government. So what company B did is that company B will say, hey, company A, can you please sell the permit to me? So company B will purchase the permit from A, and A will gain something from company B. So they kind of having trading in terms of the emission quantity. Okay, this is like quantity-based approach. Next, we have market facilitation. For example, assigning property right to the right parties, providing information, because when you have the information, you are assisting people to see how much is the pollution, and then reducing transaction costs. So the last part, we call it cohesion approach or solution. So normally in economics, when they talk about externalities, the solution suggested is using cost theorem, which is what we call cohesion solution. Okay, I will be explaining this in the next slide because this is a very famous, common solution to address the externality. Okay, then we have talked about market-based approaches. The next one is suasion. Okay, the government can use suasion, education, disclosure, or price. Suasion means that government can persuade people or persuade the company by giving information. Well, look, producing pollution, releasing pollution to the environment is not good. You are actually harming the environment as well as harming the welfare of people. So government give kind of persuading people so that they try to reduce. They have the awareness that pollutions are not good, so they try to reduce by themselves. Giving education, perhaps disclosure. Disclosure means that government asks each of the factory, each of the firm to disclose the amounts of their pollution. Okay, so when when everyone knows about their amounts of pollution, they will feel a bit scared, right? Because if let's say you have five factories and only one factory is polluting too much, so what happens is that this factory will be subjected to so many criticized, right? So this factory will try their best to reduce their pollution so that people will not boycotting their products. So this is the methods of disclosure. And then government can also give price. If let's say they can reduce their pollution up to a certain level, government will think that, okay, you are a very good company, so I'll give you some tokens of appreciation. Okay. And the last one is that public provisions of funding. For example, government fund the research and development to make sure that they can reduce their pollution. Okay, so for your information, many policy approach are hybrid. It means that not necessarily the government have to choose one. Should I use regulation, command and control, or should I use market based? Should I use situation? So no, there is no clear cut as you have to choose one. You can have a mixture of them. Some government will implement all of them. Some depends. Okay, sometimes when you kind of educating people, promoting, please don't pollute, people will not listen. So if let's say they know that they are citizen, they know that the firms are not listening to them, perhaps they will say, okay, I will just use command and control. I will command and you will follow. So it depends on the behavior of that country. Okay. So the next one, so you can see here on your left side, individual. This is the point that I took from Prof. Slama's slide. I think that it is very useful. Why? Because as a Muslim, we are the Khalifah, right? We have to be able to utilize the resources efficiently. We have the responsibility to actually manage the resources given by Allah to us. Okay, and we also have to actually treat all creations of Allah with fair, with adil. Okay, sometimes because we think that, well, we are human being, we are Khalifa, we can do whatever we want. No, when we are Khalifa, we have more responsible to look after everything. Okay, so I think that we have also to start, we also have to educate ourselves, because all these externalities are coming from us. If let's say we are the unresponsible people, we are the source of pollution. If let's say we try to be mindful, so this problem will not happen. Okay, that is if let's say we act as Khalifa. We also have to act as the servant by following the guidelines prescribed by Allah. It means that there is no absolute right over other creation. Sometimes because we think that we are human being, we have like we think that we are superior compared to other creatures, compared to animals, compared to plant, compared to forest. We can do whatever to them because we are human. Okay, but no, in the eyes of Allah, everyone's are the same, including human, animals, and other creatures. So don't feel so good about ourselves. Okay, we have to think that we have this big responsibility to manage everything. Okay, so the example here, we have to be mindful, we have to be moderate in doing everything. Okay, I put there 4 R's, means that if let's say we want to purchase something, we have to think first. Do you think that purchasing this item is necessary? Can we live without it? Just sometimes we think that because we have good income, high income, we have the purchasing power. We want to purchase whatever we want. That is not the case. Remember, although our wants are unlimited, but our resources are limited. So think about it. Think about others before you want to spend your penny. Okay, think about it. So we have to think, well, is it necessary? If yes, then we purchase it. Then once we purchase the item, try to use it as long as possible. Sometimes we purchase the t-shirt, and then after a month, after a few months, you feel bored about it. So you purchase another one. So you are wasting your resources. Don't do that. If you want to purchase something, think about it, think twice. If you think that it is necessary, then purchase. Then try to use as max as possible. Then try to what we call for us, reduce, refuse, reuse it, and then if you cannot use it anymore, then you try to recycle it. Okay, convert it into something else so that the resources can be preserved. Okay, and no extravagance or wastefulness. Okay, next. Okay, thank you, Dr. Zara. Okay, so as I mentioned to you, I want to explain what is cost theorem or cohesion solution. So it says that proper assignments of property right, even if externalities are present, will allow bargaining between parties such that efficient solution result regardless of who holds the right. So in a simple words, this is just the definition given by the textbook. So let me just simplify it. So it says that when we have externalities, the best solution is that we assign property right to the parties. So you have two parties. One is the firms or the factory. Another one is the public or community. So remember you have two parties. So if let's say the externality is present, you just assign one right to either of them. Doesn't matter who hold the right. Okay, when you assign the right, so basically you can solve the problems of externality. So how does it work? Sounds ridiculous, right? So Okay, for example, the community has the right to clean air. Okay, so if let's say community has the right to clean air, the firm cannot simply pollute the clean air, right? So if let's say the firm want to pollute the clean air, the firm has to compensate to community for polluting their right of clean air. But then, okay, that is how it works. If let's say the rights are given to the firm, means that the firm has the right to pollute. So what happened is that the community will somehow pay the firm so that the firm can reduce the pollution. So this is how it works. Okay, so regardless who hold the right, basically they can actually somehow manage the externality. So cost theorem assume zero transaction cost, zero cost for this community and firm, and also assume damages are accessible, means that they know the damage, and measurable. They can also measure how much they are affected. Okay, these are the assumptions of cost theorem to work. Okay, remember economics always have so many assumptions, but if let's say the assumptions are not working, then the whole theory, the whole concept will be gone, will not be applicable, will not be relevant anymore. Okay, but then for your information, causation solution aren't always pursued. Why is that? Because the assumption are not practical. Okay, so the first one is that transaction costs are often large. For example, this firm want pollute the environment, this firm release toxic substance into the air, and then if let's say the firm, for example, the right, the community has the right to clean air, and then the firm pollute the environment. So basically, the firm has to compensate the community, right? But then because there are so many people in the village, for example, hundreds of them, if let's say the firms want to compensate each one of them, what happened to the profits of the firm? The firm will go bankrupt. So the firm cannot operate anymore. So it will not work. It will not work. And second, property rights often costly to define and enforce. For example, the government has defined, okay, this property right of clean air belongs to the community. And then if let's say government want to enforce that, if let's say the firm somehow breach the agreement, the firm pollute too much, but then if let's say we want to sue the firm, we want to ask the firm to compensate the community, there must be an evidence, right? For example, there is what we call CCTV monitoring devices, so that the community can tell, okay, basically the firm didn't follow the rules. So they, to install the CCTV or to install the monitoring devices are expensive, extremely expensive. That's why sometimes it's hard to enforce because the costs are too large. And source of pollution is unclear. It means that the simple example is that sometimes when you talk about factory, they are situated in the industrial area. Industrial area means that so many factories in that area, in that site. So for example, you have 10 factories, but then only one factory is the one who released mercury into a river. And what happened is that that river is used by community around it, and then they are affected by the mercury. So if let's say the community want to sue the factory, which factory is actually giving them the health issue, health impact? So they cannot simply point, well, this factory is responsible, so this factory should compensate us. Sometimes the source of pollution is unclear to the victim. They don't know which factory are actually responsible for that. And the last one, basically there are many reasons why cost theorem is not working, but I just give a few. Last one, victims are unaware of the pollution impacts. Sometimes the factory is far away from the residential area, but because the wind blows to that area, so they kind of exposed to the pollution, air pollution, and then they got sick, and then they are not sure why they are ill. Is it because they have low immunity system? But because of that pollution, they are unaware that the pollution are coming from a far distance factory. Okay, sometimes this will be the case. And Coase theorem was actually introduced by Ronald Coase. Okay, next. Okay, so um, uh, for your information, externalities are transboundary. It means that it doesn't respect the boundary of country. Remember, we are living in one earth, regardless that we are from different countries, but pollution, they don't really respect the boundary. For example, if let's say the pollution are uh, of occurred in Malaysia, they don't think that, okay, I cannot go to Indonesia because this is a different country. No, they will just simply cross the boundary. That's why we call it externalities are actually transboundary. So when you have this kind of problem, or before that, the previous discussion are talking about domestic externalities, means that we only talk about local externality issue. Now we are talking about when the externalities are affecting many other countries, not within the country. So when you have these kind of problems, what are the solution? Of course, you have to have international cooperation. You have to collaborate with all the affected countries. Now we are not talking about firm and the community. We are not talking about firm, one factory with one village. We are talking about one country with many other countries, right? So we have to have meeting with the international with different countries. Okay, so the example here is that Indonesian forest fire. Well, for your information, this is a very common issue. People will say, people will blame Indonesia, Indonesia will blame Malaysia, will blame so many peoples because there are many stakeholders inside this kind of operation. But I just want to give you the example. The Indonesian forest fire, it occurs like almost every year. What happened is that the forest fire is in Indonesia, but because of the fire, the smoke is actually affecting many countries like Malaysia, Thailand, Singapore, and Brunei. So you can see that the pollution, the externalities are affecting other countries. So, well, what happens is that they have to have a meeting to find the right solution. But then this problem keep ongoing even until now. Okay, it means that it shows that it's not easy actually to solve this problem because you are talking about countries. Okay, so to let you know, cooperative solutions are actually generally harder the larger the number of countries involved. Even though you are talking about 5 countries that are impacted by forest fire, but the problem is not solved. Can you imagine when we talk about climate change? Okay, we are talking about the whole country in the world. Can we have a meeting and try to reduce the problem? Is almost impossible. Why is that? Because there is an incentive to free ride. Okay, free ride is economic term. It means that, okay, you have to remember uh, uh, when firm pollute or when the company pollute because they want to produce something. Okay, they are not polluting because they are so mean. No, they are polluting because they want to produce something. For example, they want to produce smartphone. That's why they have to pollute. They have to release their what we call um, waste. Okay, they have to release their waste into somewhere, into the air or river, whatever, into the soil, whatever. Okay, so they pollute because they want to produce something. They want to produce something because they want to get profit. And then when they get profit, it will have a positive impact on the economic growth. Okay, so basically government will support the firm to pollute because they have to, not because they just so mean, because they have to. Okay, they have their reason for that. Okay, so now, if let's say they reduce their pollution, what happened? It will affect their profit. It will also affect the economic growth. So normally, they don't want to reduce their profit. They don't want to reduce their pollution. Okay, that's why when we talk about climate change, please everyone. If let's say the chairman said, please all countries reduce your pollution, no one want to follow that because if they reduce their pollution, it will affect their profit. If let's say they said you can pollute as much as you can, but then you have to clean up your mess. Okay, cleaning up the mess means that they have to take some portions of their profit to clean up the mess. It means that they also have to reduce the profit, right? So many people will not try to follow that kind of rule. Okay, that's why we call many people try to free ride, means that they will not follow that kind of agreement. And then larger transaction cost. Well, if you really want to make sure that, for example, Indonesia, we want to stop the forest fire. If you want to stop that, you have to go to Indonesia. You will incur cost to go to them, talk to them. Okay? There is no such thing as a free lunch. You want something happen, it's free. No, you have to incur cost. You have to tell them. And then to make sure that they follow what you ask, you have to install monitoring devices and so on. All these things involve huge costs. Okay, that's why it's hard to get cooperation from different countries. Okay, it's hard. Okay, next, Dr. Zara. Okay, so this, if you can see the picture, this is the picture for United Nations Climate Change Conference. So they know that, well, climate change is getting severe and severe. So what happened is that they call up everyone from different countries to discuss about it, to make sure that we should do something to reduce the impacts of climate change. And then, according to Todd Stern, which is the US climate negotiator, he said that after the Copenhagen round, well, he kind of like a bit upset. You cannot negotiate in the groups of 192 countries. We are not talking about people, countries. People will keep fighting, arguing. Well, the poor countries or developing countries will say, the developed countries should help them so that they can prosper, so that they can have economic growth. And then the developed country will say, well, look, poor country, you have to reduce your pollution. You are the source of pollution. You are the reason why we have severe climate change. And then this poor country will be saying that we also want to develop. We also want to achieve like you. So they will keep fighting and blaming everyone. So at the end of the day, what happened is that they will not achieve the mutual cooperation. It's hard. We are talking about countries. Even though we are talking about Indonesian forest fire, just 5 countries affected, we still cannot get the solution. Can you imagine when we talk about the whole world? It's almost impossible. Okay. So next. Okay. So why we are so concerned about externality? Why the topics? Why the discussion of today's topic is about externalities? So the reason is that externalities will affect sustainability. So what is sustainability? Okay, so there are many definitions of sustainability, but I will just pick one, okay, which is a bit comprehensive. It means that developments that meets the needs of the present generation without compromising the ability of future generation to meet their own needs. What does it mean? It means that whatever we are doing today, whatever economic transaction, economic activities that we are doing today, if let's say we want to use the resources, natural resources, we have to make sure our action will not affect the future generation. We have to make sure the resource that we have today is also available for the future. Okay, sometimes we are too greedy, we want to get whatever we want, we want to purchase everything, and we forgot that the resources are limited, and at the end of the day, there is nothing left for the future generation. Okay, so sustainability means that we are able to sustain what we have today, even though we want to achieve some development. We have to make sure that these resources are also available for our great grandchildren. Okay, we have to make sure that that is the purpose of, that is the kind of the aims of sustainability. Okay, so United Nations basically emphasizes on 17 SDGs, 17 Sustainable Development Goals. So there are 17 goals that United Nations think that are important, but then 6 of them are actually focusing on the environment. Let me put it this way: instead of 6 out of 17, 1/3 of all the objective, all the goals are actually focusing on the environment. What does it mean? It means that we have to protect, we have to preserve the environment, because environments are actually in danger. So we keep exploiting this environment too much that we forgot that it will affect the future generation. So if you can see this sustainable development goal, so the first one that focus on the environment is that goal number 6, we want to have clean water and sanitization. Why do we want to have clean water? If you don't have clean water, you will be in disaster, right? You have to have clean water for your daily consumption and use, right? So it shows that the water are affected because of our activities. Remember, when the factory wanna release their pollution, normally they will just simply dump in the river, and the river will go to the ocean. So it will affect our water supply. Okay, so we want to preserve our water. That's why the objective is to have clean water. Remember that there is a reason why do they put this as their objective, because the water are endangered, are affected. Okay, and then number 7, affordable and clean energy. So at the moment, the energy is generated using coal. Coal is very cheap. That's why when we want to generate electricity, we will be using coal. But then the use of coal in production in generating electricity are very polluted. Okay, that's why the goals of sustainable development is that to have a clean energy means that we want to find the substitute alternative to coal, which is we call it a better alternative. For example, renewable energy, which is very clean, which is better than the coal. Okay, and then what else? That is second. Third is that we want number 12, SDGs number 12, responsible consumption and production. Remember, when we consume, when we produce something, we normally will kind of generate waste. So we want to minimize that, or else it will affect our environment, or else it will affect the soil quality of the earth. Okay, and then climate exchange, goal number 13, and then life below water, we want to protect them. Remember, the habitats inside the water are our source of food. If let's say we affect them, what happened to us? We will be starving at the end of the day. So we want to protect them. They are actually endangered because of us, because of our uh, greedy, because we consume them too much. So we have to make sure that they are protected. And then number 15, life on land. So we have to make sure that the biodiversity of land are, the ecosystems are preserved. Sometimes because we want to get profit, so we cut all the trees, you use the timber, everything we use for our own benefit. I mean, sometimes we forgot that at the end of the day, if these whole things are gone, our food, our land, if they are all polluted, we will be the one who are suffering from that. So we forgot that. We forgot. Okay. So next one. Dr. Zara, next slide. Okay, thank you. Okay, now sustainability and circular economy. Okay. Okay, so you already learned, you know that what is sustainability, right? So now I want to tell about circular economy. It is introduced to address the issues of sustainability. So when we talk about sustainability, we are focusing on the three P's, which is people, planets, and profit. Peoples means that we want to focus on the social aspect. Planets is the environment. Profit is economy. So for us, social, environment, and economy are important for us. We want to make sure that we are excel, we success in these three different area. Okay, and circular economy focuses on new ways of creating values by extending products lifespan through recovering, regenerating, and redesigning the products at the ends of their life service. So what does it mean? This is just the definition given by the textbook. So it means that a circular economy try to use the natural resources in an efficient way, okay, in such a way that the waste of our from our consumption can be used as an input for new production. So remember, when we consume something, we will produce the waste, right? In circular economy, the waste will be treated as an input, a valuable resources. That's why it can be used as an input to produce other or new products. This is the concept of circular economy. It means that they wanted to make sure that all these natural resources, all these scarce resources are being circulated inside the market system. They don't want to waste these resources because resources are expensive, resources are scarce, so they want to make sure that all these resources are used efficiently. This is the concept of circular economy. And circular economy is the opposites of linear models. Linear models is like the models are just linear, very static. What does it mean? We call it take, make, and dispose. Means that you take the resources from the nature, and then you produce the products, and then you consume it, and then you simply dispose. You just throw away into the landfill. Okay, basically the resources is used just one time. It's such a waste because resources can be used many times. Okay, so if you can see the flow on your right side, that is the flow of circular economy. So I'll start with telling you that it will have a cleaner production. Why? Because they are using fewer resources. They are actually using green technology. Green technology means that the mission will release lesser or fewer pollution. That's why we call it cleaner production, because they will emit lesser pollution. And then when you sell to the consumer will use it for long means that they will try to extend the life cycles of the products. Okay, and then at the end of the life cycles of the products, when they want to waste it, when they want to throw it, they separate the waste, and then the waste, remember, will be reused as a new resources to produce new products. Okay, we call this new product green products, because these green products are actually green because it is coming, the input is coming from the waste. Okay, so the benefits of circular economy is that it can generate or increase income. So in this case, if you can see on your right top, it can actually increase not just income, the profits of the company. Why is that? Because they are using fewer resources. Resources are expensive, and then if the company use fewer resources, definitely they can increase their income, their profit, right? And then when they use fewer resources, definitely the company can reduce the resource dependency. They will not use so many valuable resources, and they can also minimize the waste and reduce environmental footprints. Okay, next. Okay, so let me tell you the advantages and disadvantages of circular economy. Okay, there are a few. Well, there are actually many. I just put a few. Okay, the first advantage is actually a study on 7 European countries found that moving towards circular economy will reduce about 70% of greenhouse gases, and also can increase workforce by about 4%. Okay, so basically if we move towards circular economy, we can actually reduce the impacts of greenhouse gases. What is greenhouse gases? Well, greenhouse gases is the main contributor to climate change. Okay, so if let's say we can reduce up to 70%, it's a good move. We have to go to circular economy, we have to move forward to circular economy. And next advantage is that the European Union business could gain net saving. Well, you can save a lot because you use lesser or fewer resources of 600 billion, uh, 600 billion. Okay, so why do the advantages are coming from European countries? Because they are developed countries, they can see the potentials of circular economy. They can see that by moving towards circular economy, they can somehow get the profit. They can get a better welfare on their peoples. They can reduce the pollution and so on. That's why they think that the potentials of circular economy is huge, and they want to move to it. That's why they have done so many research, so many studies on the advantage of circular economy. Okay, next one, the disadvantages of circular economy. So for your information, circular economy has an implicit cost. Okay, the cost of maintaining the products. For example, you purchase a pair of shoe. So to maintain the shoe, so that you can use it for long, the cost sometimes is not justifiable compared to purchasing a new one. If let's say you want to keep your old shoes, you will, if let's say it is broken, you will go and repair, and then you keep maintaining. So the cost of all this maintaining of your shoes, somehow if you purchase a new one, the new one will be cheaper compared to maintaining your old shoes. So people may not want to maintain their old shoes. They may prefer to purchase the new one. Okay, and the cost of recovering. So what does it mean? Okay, for example, when we talk about electrical item, so normally there are valuable metal inside your uh, in your electrical item. So when you throw it away, so the company can actually recover, can actually extract useful or what we call valuable metal from your electrical item. But then the cost of recovering this metal sometimes are more expensive compared to just get the new metal from somewhere. Okay, sometimes the cost are actually even higher because they have to have a specific technology, specific machine to extract this metal. Okay, and recycling. Well, sometimes you cannot recycle your product for long. For example, when you talk about your shoes, the fabric, when you keep recycling and recycling, remember circular economy talk about the waste become the inputs of new production. But then if you keep using the waste, you keep recycling it, the fabric will no longer be good quality, right? If let's say your input is not a good quality, so you will also produce low quality products. So you cannot recycle something perpetually. At some point you have to stop. Perhaps recycling for once is good, twice is good. After some time you cannot keep using the input. Okay, and then we have rebound effects. This is economic terms. So the the explanation is that when you have product efficiency, or when your product efficiency has improved, what happened is that your cost of production will become lower. And then when your cost of production is small or low, your price will also be low. Okay, because you can get profit out of it, so definitely you will charge a lower price. So when you have a lower price, what happened? It will boost up your production and also consumption. Okay, you will produce more because your cost is small, and then when you produce more and then you sell it at a cheaper price, people will consume, people will purchase your product. And what happened is that the result, there will be an increase in the increase of demand for resource extraction, and also will produce waste generation. So you want to reduce the uh, environmental problem, but then somehow you kind of produce even more waste because of circular economy concept, because of the flow of the circular economy. Okay, it's an irony. And then the last one, silence, circular economy, silence on the social aspect. So when you talk about circular economy, you are emphasizing on the green technology. You are emphasizing the use of a good technology, so that that technology, that machine can actually produce your product using fewer resources, and also that technology can actually emit or release lesser pollution. So in order to have that, you need engineer, you need a skilled labor. So in circular economy, they kind of actually promoting skilled labor. So well, the problem is that those unskilled labor will be in disadvantages. Okay, because of the system, how it works. Okay, next to the zero. Okay, so I will love to share a case study on the applications of circular economy on food waste. Basically, you can practice this concept on different types of waste. But in the case of Malaysia, food waste is an alarming problem. It is a serious problem. So let me just give you the overview of what is going on regarding the food waste. So nearly 1/3 of the world's food is wasted or lost every year. Yet a growing number of people are starving. Can you imagine? People are starving, but some people simply waste their food. It's such an irony, right? And this number was about 690 million in 2019, and it is likely to rise in the post-COVID time. Okay? Food loss and waste is not only a social and environmental issue. When you talk about starving people, we are actually focusing on the social aspect. When you talk about the food is being wasted, is being dumped into the landfill, you are kind of producing pollution to the land. So this is actually referring to environmental issue. But for your information, it also represents a significant economic loss, as it costs the global economy around 936 billion a year. Can you imagine we kind of wasting this 900 billions a year? Well, we are very rich, but some people don't even have a food, don't even have food, and we simply feel okay by wasting the food. We shouldn't do that. Remember, we are the Khalifa. Okay, in the case of Malaysia, in 2018, Malaysia generated a total of 38,000 tons of waste per day. And for your information, the biggest contributor was coming from food waste. It's about half of it. So half of Malaysian waste is actually coming from food waste. Well, Malaysia is very rich, very generous. We simply throw away our food. Okay? And this percentage has not changed much since 1980s. Since 1980s, we have wasted half of our we have wasted lots of food, and then the totals of the waste, half of it are coming from waste, and even until now. So it shows that we have to do something about it, because we haven't tackled these problems since a long time ago. Okay, so next. Okay, so what happened is that Malaysians are used to apply this concept, linear models. Okay, so this is very comfortable for Malaysian. What is that? Okay, when we talk about food, so let me be specific here, which is rice. So we'll start with the production. This is the productions of paddy, and then we convert it into consumption. We have chicken rice, and then once we cannot finish the rice, it's become the waste, and then we just simply throw it away. We just simply dump it in the landfill or the dumping site. So this is the common practice for Malaysian. because we have purchasing power. Why should we care about this waste, right? We don't feel guilty about by doing this. Okay, so next. So next, Sarah. So what we are doing is that we are trying to apply the concept of circular economy model in the case of food, in the case of rice. So if you can see number one, the production. So this is the productions of rice from paddy to rice, and then we convert it into consumption. And sometimes we cannot finish our food, right? So when we cannot finish it, then it become waste. So we classify waste into two. First is edible, second is non-edible. So edibles means that even though it is a waste, but it still can be eaten by people, right? It is not even polluted. Some people can still eat it, but it's just that we couldn't finish the food. And second types of waste, we call it non-edible. Non-edible is like banana peel, the shell of eggs, and so on. This is something non-edible. So this waste can actually be processed. Okay, so the edible food, edible waste can actually be processed into human consumption, while the non-edible can be processed into non-human consumption. So it is very common that all the waste, regardless whether they are edibles or non-edible, are processed into non-human consumption. For example, they use it for feeding their animals, they use it for to produce fertilizer. But for your information, if let's say you process it for non-human consumption, the value is lower. Okay, so we want to process the waste into human consumption so that it will give uh, it will give high value and it will give more benefit for people. Okay, so what we did is that we process the edible waste into human consumption, and the product is called as upcycled products. Okay, so from the wasted rice, we treat it and we produce perhaps breakfast cereals, perhaps a rice cracker. Okay, so if you can see the terms upcycle product, there is a difference between upcycle and recycle. Some people will ask, what is the difference between recycle and upcycle? They sound cycle, but then up and re. So recycle means that when you recycle the product, the new product will have a lower value compared to the original product. That is recycle. Okay. For example, the wasted rice, when you recycle it and you get you produce fertilizer, the value of fertilizer is lower compared to the rice. But then upcycle means that the value is higher compared to the original products. Okay, next, Dr. Zara. Okay, so what we did is that we conducted lab experiment. So we treated the rice waste uh, and the process. We have undergone the experimental process to make sure that our products are actually clean and safe. It has to be clean. Even though it is clean, it also has to be safe. If let's say it is just clean and then it is not safe for human consumption, well, you cannot have that kind of products. So what we did is that we treated the product in a thorough manner. So you can see that the untreated rice, you can see it has some color. Perhaps this way, perhaps the people who are consuming this mix it with curry. I'm not sure. So what we did is that once we get the waste, we take out all the other substance like the bones of fish, bones of whatever chicken, and then the um, veggie, and we just take the rice and then we treated it. You can see that the color has different. Okay, and then from that we produce if you can see the right picture, we produce a rice cracker. Okay, and then we pack into small plastic so that people can give comments from our products. Okay, so we did that in the experiment. Okay, and then we conducted a survey to know public acceptance. So so in this survey we have two phases. Phase one is that we ask about people's preference, whether they prefer circular economy concept or they prefer linear model concept, because people are used to have linear models. So we ask them, if let's say you have linear models and then circular economy model, which one do you prefer? So most of the respondents prefer circular economy. Okay, but then in phase one, they didn't like the taste of our circular economy product. So they gave us poor rating. The reason is that they said that the texture was hard, and then the taste is tasteless, means that there is no taste because we didn't put any flavor. Okay, the texture was hard because in the first phase we were using traditional method. When we want to crack the rice, we crack it using spoon. So that's why the structure of the rice was still there. So when people taste it, like, it was so hard, so people didn't like it. They think that it is non-eatable because it's too hard. And in phase two, after collecting all their comments and suggestions, the same result. They Most of them prefer circular economy concept because they think that it is a very good concept which can somehow preserve our environment, preserve our resources, and at the same time, will minimize the waste generation. So they love the idea of circular economy. And then because our product has improved, they really like it. They give us good rating and very good rating. Okay, and we are also happy about it. At least we do something. Okay, and next one, Dr. Zara. Okay, so conclusion. I would love to conclude my presentation. Externalities are our responsibility because we are the source of pollution. Without us, there is no pollution. Animals will not pollute. The plant will not pollute. We are the one who pollute the environment. So because we are the source of pollution, we have to be responsible for our action. So I would love to conclude my slide with some Quranic verses that are relevant to us. Okay, here humans are responsible on earth because Allah said that in verse 230. Remember when your Lord said to the angel, I'm going to place a successive human authority on earth. As if like Allah, basically Allah believed that we as human beings, as Khalifa, are able to actually manage this earth, to manage these resources in efficient way. So because Allah gave us this amanah, Allah believed that we are able to protect, we are able to manage all these resources. So we have to do our job. Okay, we have to do our job. And next one, we have to respect all creation. So Allah said that, and there is no creatures on or within the earth or bird that flies with its wing except that there are communities like you. So there is no such thing that we are superior creation compared to animal. We are superior compared to plant. No, there is no such thing because we are all the same. We are all the same, right? Okay, and we have not neglected in the registered a thing. And the last one, we shouldn't do damage on earth. As Allah mentioned, you must not do damage to the earth because earth is our amanah, so we have to look after it. If we pollute it, we are the one who will be affected heavily by our action. So remember that. With that, I will love to end my session or discussion. Okay, Dr. Sarah, I'll pass over to you.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Husna, for your wonderful lecture. We are grateful for the opportunity to learn from you, for learning another sub-branches of economics, right? I would also like to thank all our participants. I am currently reading the comments from YouTube and also from our Facebook platforms, who is attending and also viewing this lecture from various parts of the world. So thank you so much for your commitment and also support for this program. All right, so I'll now take some questions. You can also post questions in YouTube and Facebook if you have. I'll take that for Dr. Husna. For your information, Dr. Husna is actually practicing what she preached, or walk the talk, we say. She is producing fertilizer from her food waste and occasionally bring that to our campus for some of our departments program. Okay, so let me see some questions. I have some question in Zoom. Wait. Okay. What is the difference between sustainable economy and circular economy?
Okay, so I'll try to ask that first. The difference between sustainable economy and circular economy. So circular economy is just a method and approach that is trying to achieve sustainable economy. Okay, it is just one method. There are many types of method, but it is just one new approach to achieve sustainable economy. Okay. Okay, that's it. That's the answer.
All right. Okay, thank you, Dr. Husna. All right, another question is just a clarification, I think. Assalamualaikum, Doctor. In the past 4 slides, I want to know what she mean with some numbers in brackets, example 1970.
Okay, so basically, that those points are taken from my paper. So normally, when you wrote a paper, so instead of citing the authors, you just put numbers. So I didn't really change that because if I want to cite all the authors, it will have a long sentence. Okay, it's just the author.
All right, thank you, Doctor. Okay, so another participant is saying that can tell Dr. Husna is very passionate about her expertise. Exactly. All right, another question is that what is the main differences perspective between Islamic and conventional perspective in terms of externalities?
Sorry again.
I think I will rephrase the question. What is the difference between Islamic and conventional perspective in terms of externalities?
Okay, in terms of externalities, perhaps well, these two are the same. It's just that the way we approach on how to handle the externalities are different. Because in conventional economics, they think that externalities are problem for them, so they will try to minimize the problems. And the way how they minimize the problems, they will look at the profit, the in terms of the cost. If let's say if let's say they can reduce the cost of minimizing the externalities, they will go for it. But in Islamic economics, perhaps cost is not the only criteria for us to handle to tackle the externalities. We will also look at from other views. We have to look at the ethical point of view. So many consideration. We also have to look at the impacts on not just human, to animals, to the environment. Sometimes in conventional, they don't really care about the impacts on perhaps the environment. They care, but not as much as what we care. Because for us, we think that everything have their own right. So that's why the way we approach will be a bit different compared to the conventional one. Okay.
All right, thank you, Doctor. Could you please explain once again the equations on CE?
Equations on CE.
Yes.
Equation. Do we have an equation under circular economy?
I'm not sure which one he is referring to.
Is it the flow of circular economy? Because at the moment I'm just sharing this flow of circular economy, so I'm not showing any equation because equation will be too mathematical. I didn't think that I put that in the slide. So Dr. Zara, perhaps we can go to the flow of circular economy.
Okay.
Can you just open the slide? So perhaps okay, maybe this
This one,
one.
right? Okay.
This is the flow. Okay, because equation will involve mathematical component. Okay, so okay, we'll start with the production. So it depends. In this case, I'm using food. You can also use different types of production. You can use T-shirt. You can use laptop. Whatever it is relevant to you, because different country gonna have different problem, right? In the case of Malaysia, we are having serious problem in the food production, in the food waste. So if you can see here, the productions of rice, we start with paddy and rice. So perhaps I forgot to mention about normal products. So this is what we call normal product because I want to differentiate with upcycle product. Okay, so you start with the productions of rice and then you convert it into consumption. This is like your chicken rice, and then when you have the leftover, we call it waste, and then I divided waste into edible waste and non-edible waste. So edible is something that everyone can also eat it, even though it is in the form of waste. While non-edible, this is something like people cannot eat it, like banana peel, the egg shells, what else? Everything which is non-edible. Okay, and then when this waste can be processed. So for non-edible, normally we will process it into the non-human consumption. While the eatable, because we think that it has value, people still can enjoy the benefits of this waste. So what we did is that we process it, we treat this waste into human consumption. So you can, in my case, I'm using rice cracker, right? But basically, the food, the edible food can be transform into different types of products. You can convert it into perhaps fried rice. You can convert it into something else. Okay, as long as it has benefit, it has value. And once you are able to transform it into something valuable, we call it upcycle. So this is just a term, okay? Just a term used in my paper. You can call it circular economy product. But why we use this term? Because this term can explain our product well. Okay? Yeah. Is that? I think that is the flow of the circular economy.
Inshallah. All right, thank you. Those now we have some time, so I'm taking some question from YouTube right now.
In that area, but perhaps what you can do, well, you can claim a complaint. You can give a complaint to government. Sometimes the government will just close their eyes because factory will give them something, right? Tax. So if you want to recycle the waste from the river, you have to have a chemical engineer. You have to have the expert who can actually filter the waste. Okay, because when I did my PhD, I kind of like looking at the river quality, but then you have to have the expert because only the expert can invent the machine. Only the expert can actually find ways to do the filtration. So you have to produce. You have to really collaborate with the expert to do that. So try to start with a small activity like recycling. Perhaps you turn your waste into fertilizer, like I did, as mentioned by Dr. Zara. Try to do a small action because all our actions are will have some value in the eyes of Allah. Try to start from the small action. Okay.
Okay. Any reading materials about your topic that you highly recommend?
Okay. Basically, you can just type my name and then just search my paper. Okay. And basically, if you want to have readings on circular economy, just type circular economy. There are thousands of paper wrote about circular economy because it is like a new trending now. When people talk about sustainability, they will discuss about circular economy. So you can just type circular economy. It will you can see thousands of papers. You can also type what else waste minimization. You can also type waste treatment process. All these kind of things are related to our discussion today. Okay.
Okay, the next question is quite long, so I'm gonna read it, and perhaps could be looking, depending on your response, maybe it could be our last questions, right? Is allowing or is practicing riba in daily economic transaction include one of externalities? I think is practicing riba in daily economic transaction considered as one of the externalities, since the effect of riba is more destructive for now, next generation, and the day after.
Okay.
Then which party should take responsible in such destructive economic system, and how to prevent or reduce said riba practice for the next near future?
Oh, there are three questions there. Can I start from the first one and then
Yes, sure.
the second later on? Okay. So the first one is that is practicing riba is one types of externalities, right? That is the first question. Okay. So you have to remember the definitions of externality. Means that your transaction will have an impact on the third party. If let's say you are practicing riba, you are in that transaction, you are in that business. So that is not externalities. Externalities is that when you are doing the riba transaction, you are involving with riba, and someone else who has nothing to do with riba are affected because of your activities. That is externalities. If let's say you are in that business, that is not externalities. Okay, the same question was asked by my student when they asked me like if let's say they are actually driving cars, are they actually involving, are they are facing externalities issue? But then when they drive the car, basically they are the one who pollute the environment. So basically they are not affecting by the externalities. Externalities means that someone else who has nothing to do with you, but then they are suffering from your action, suffering from your activities. That is externalities. So riba, if let's say you are in that, you are not. It is not part of the externalities. That is first question. Second question, what is it, Dr. Zara? Sorry, Dr. Zara, I cannot hear you.
Okay. Which party should take responsible?
Wow, which party should take responsible? Well, we know that this kind of riba is something common. It is like embedded in the market system, in economic system. So you cannot get away from it, right? You cannot get away from it. It's like it's already there. So perhaps the only thing that we can do as Muslim, we try to avoid that. If let's say you cannot stay away from it, then perhaps, well, just do tawakal to Allah because it's already in the system. So I'm not the Islamic expert. Remember, I'm from environment. Okay, the next one.
Okay, so the next part of the question is that how to prevent or reduce the state riba practice.
Wow. I think this question is more relevant to those who will be expanding in the financial system, right? So I'm sorry for that because riba and Islam is and financial system is not really my area, so I cannot really explain that. Okay.
Okay. Doctor, one last question, looking at the time. Okay.
Okay. I think
My question is on transactional externality. How can international community equitably address the effects of climate change?
sorry, Dr. Zera, I couldn't hear your voice.
Okay. Next question is that how can international community equitably address the effects of climate change?
Hmm. Well, you are talking about countries, right? All those countries. So basically, what they did is that they will ask a different country depending on their situation. For example, in the case of Malaysia, we have many resources. We have many forests. So what we were asked by the chair, the chair is that they ask us to actually have this kind of forest preserved because when we have many forests, basically this forest can actually absorb all this kind of air pollution. So certain countries that have resources, they are asked to preserve their resources so that their resources can absorb all the pollution. But certain countries don't have this kind of resources. So, but then they have some advantages in terms of technology. So they are asked to kind of create or invent this technology, green technology, so that the technology can be used by other countries. Or some people, they don't have technologies, they don't have perhaps resources. They are asked to but then they have money. They are asked to actually give money, sponsored certain countries, poor countries, so that this poor country can actually do the cleanup, do the clean up their pollution. So different country gonna have different criteria, different advantage, different what we call um, different conditions. So they are asked to do something that they are able to do. Okay, that is what they are required. But depends. Sometimes they not listen to the commands from the chair of the world, UNDP. Okay.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Husna. I think let us, be fair and let Dr. Husna have some rest on her Sunday. So thank you so much. We really appreciate the knowledge that you shared with us. May Allah bless you and your effort for that. And to all my participants, I'm really sorry that I can't take any more questions. But always, as I said, our speaker or lecturer always be ready to answer your question through her personal email, inshallah. I think it's Husna Jamaluddin at iium.edu.my, correct? She shared that on her first slide. So you can always reach her through her personal email. With that, okay, let's take a break. We'll start our next session at 11 a.m. Malaysian time, inshallah. Thank you, Dr. Husna, and thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Right, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Welcome back. I hope you have had a good break, and also some of you are able to perform your morning prayers. So as promised, we are back after the break to listen to lectures on public finance that will be delivered by Assistant Professor Dr. Muhammad Irwan. So before I pass the floor to Dr. Irwan, let me briefly introduce him to you. Okay, so Dr. Muhammad Irwan was conferred the double degree of Bachelor of Economics and also Bachelor of Islamic Revealed Knowledge and Heritage in 2004. He received the Best Student in Economics award during his convocation, and upon graduation, he joined the Department of Economics, IIUM, as an assistant lecturer. He then went to pursue his master's and also PhD in economics at Carleton University, Canada, under the financial sponsorship of Ministry of Education and the Government of Malaysia, and also IIUM. So during this time, he was a teaching assistant and received several awards from the Carleton University due to his excellent academic performance. In 2012, he received the Royal Commonwealth Society of Ottawa. The Royal Commonwealth Society of Ottawa awarded him with the Arnold Smith Commonwealth Scholarship for being the best student from Commonwealth country. So he has been serving IIUM since 2015, and he is also our research fellow at the Center for Islamic Economics. What an inspiring background. Dr. Muhammad Irwan, let me pass the floor to you. Please be welcome.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much, Dr. Zera, for that introduction, and welcome everyone to all the participants of this program. Today, inshallah, I'll be sharing with you a brief introduction to public finance. So hopefully my slides are there on the screen. So if there's any problem, I think Dr. Zera, can you just please let me know so that I'll try my best from my side to handle the issue. All right, so let's see now. So basically what I plan to share with all of you this morning, we're going to be basically, first of all, look at how the equilibrium of the provision of public goods are being determined. So we're going to have a look at demand and supply of public goods, or including goods which have the same nature as public goods. And then once we have that knowledge, how the political equilibrium, rather than the market equilibrium, is being determined, then we're going to move on and see the different criteria, different financing methods that are available to the government. And in the end, if we have the time, inshallah, we'll try our best to do some kind of evaluation with regard to those different financing methods and their impact on efficiency, welfare, and etc. So we're going to start with a brief discussion on public goods. Now, this is important because compared to the market system, among the reasons of market failure is that certain goods cannot be basically determined. The provision, the equilibrium price, as well as equilibrium quantity cannot be determined in the market due to their different natures than the other the ordinary goods and services which can be provided by the private sector. So this is, I believe, many of you have already taken microeconomics. So you have surely came across the discussion on the issues with market failure. So these are basically among the way how we can address those failure. So let's have a look at the brief definition of public goods. So public goods basically provide benefits that cannot withheld from those who do not pay. So even if you don't pay to get any health service, the public health service, the emergency ambulance will still come and provide the service to you. The public hospital will still provide treatment to you regardless whether you pay or not for the service. So this is being shared by a large group of consumers, and public goods are usually made available politically through voting on how much to supply, now rather than being determined in the market based on the ability of the consumers to pay. And the nature of the public good is that they are non-rival in consumption. any given quantity can be enjoyed by as many consumers as possible without decreasing the amounts available to the next consumer. So if you are to consume the public treatment, public health at a public hospital, for instance, now the same amount of service, for instance, would be available to other users. And a second characteristic for public good is that they are non-exclusive. It is impossible to exclude those who do not pay from receiving or from enjoying the same benefits of the public goods. I'm just sharing with you the defense expenditures of the United States as a share of a GDP. For instance, military defense is considered to be a public good, regardless whether you pay more tax or less tax. In any countries all over the world, basically the government is responsible to provide military protection of the sovereignty of the political border of the country. Okay, as you can see that the trend it changes. It depends on the world geopolitical situation with regard to the defense expenditures. The United States is known to be the most among the highest country, highest government, the government with the highest spending on military defense. Okay, so next we're gonna just do a kind of a simple comparison just to get a better understanding between pure public and pure private goods. So pure public goods, as mentioned earlier, non-rival in consumption for the entire population of consumers, and they are non-exclusive. We cannot exclude others from using it. Like a public beach, we cannot simply deny the non-payers at the public beach from enjoying the beauty holidays in the public beach. And this would result in the widely consumed external benefits. I believe my colleague, Dr. Husna, earlier have already explained to you externalities. Another example would be with regard to, for instance, vaccination. The benefit of vaccination, a COVID-19 vaccination, will also basically provide in a widely external benefit where the non-vaccinated will also receive the benefit of being safe from being infection. If there are many people who are vaccinated, then those who are non-vaccinated will also get the benefit of a lower spread of the disease in the society. And usually pure public good are not divisible into units that can be apportioned. It's difficult to do that. While a pure private good basically have the opposite characteristic, and they provide benefit only to the person who acquired the good and not anyone else. Your mobile phone, for instance, is a private good where you have the right to use it and you have the right to deny others from using your mobile phone. And this will also cause rival in consumption. So when you have used your mobile phone, for instance, there will be less quantity available in the market for others. And this may result in neither positive or negative externalities, because usually the benefit or the cost will be limited to you. You are the one that is responsible to pay for it, and usually the benefit from this private good will be limited to yourself. So how do we measure the marginal cost? Because later on, it is important to understand this so that we can get a clearer picture, the difference between a public good and a private good. Now, when we want to analyze the cost of public good, there are two things that we need to take into account. So first of all, we need to differentiate between the marginal cost of consuming, of using a pure public good, and the marginal cost of providing or supplying a pure public good, because these two are different, are totally different. With regard to the cost of consuming a pure public good, basically once the public good has been supplied, is provided, then the additional cost of consuming the pure public good would drop to zero. Let's say, for example, this is with regard to a public light, a public lamppost, a traffic in the road. So once the light has been erected, so let's say the cost of constructing the light is 200, to provide this light to one household is 200. So once the light has been erected, then basically any additional users of the public light, there will be no additional cost of consuming the pure public good. So that's why from one household, so in the neighborhood, we have, let's say, 30 households. So altogether, the 29 other households, they would incur zero cost of consuming the pure public good with regard to consuming the pure public good. So once the public good has been provided to the first consumer, for any additional consumers, their marginal cost of consuming it would fall to zero. However, the marginal cost of producing a pure public good is not zero. Now, if you are measuring the cost of providing the light post, so any additional lamp post that we are constructing would still, we have to incur 200 cost, $200 per traffic light. So the marginal cost would then equal to average cost with regard to the production of a pure public good. So I hope by now you can clearly distinguish between the marginal cost of consuming and marginal cost of producing a public good. Now let's have a look at the range of benefits. Now, contrary to private good, where the benefits are limited to the owner, to the private owner, with regard to the public goods, some public goods, for instance, such as the world peace, may provide a collective consumed benefit to every individual on earth. However, some benefits of these public goods are basically limited to certain political, geographical borders, and others are locally consumed. If you have public, for instance, imagine having a traffic lamp post outside, just outside your house. So you will be basically, everyone in the surrounding neighborhood would get the benefit of saving electricity at night, for instance, where you can continue studying by using the public light. I mean, just giving a simple example. So this geographic range of shared benefits would basically influence the desirability of having public goods supplied by various levels of government. Because when we look at our constitution, many countries in the world, they would have already assigned different responsibilities with regard to public goods. Different public goods have been assigned to different levels of government. Military, for instance, would fall under, many countries would put military spending under military defense under the federal government, while the local garbage system and stuff would fall under the local government. Another interesting feature of public goods, some public goods are basically subject to congestion, where once congestion happens, it reduces the benefit to existing consumers when more consumers are accommodated. In this case, the marginal cost of accommodating additional consumer is no longer zero. The marginal cost of consuming these public goods, once it has reached the threshold, after the point of congestion has been reached, then any additional consumer who want to use that public good, their marginal cost of consumption is no longer zero. A good example would be a road, because a public road is a public good where it is available to any users. However, there is a limit with regard to the usage of the public road. Once it has reached a certain threshold, then it will cause traffic jam. It will cause a cost where then you will suffer, you will have discomfort, and you would basically arrive late at your destination. And it may also increase the accident risk. So this is basically just to illustrate the marginal cost of congestible public goods. For instance, a public road. So to provide that public road to the first user, after it has made available, the marginal cost would drop immediately to zero. Unfortunately, after it has reached the threshold of N star, then any additional users that want to use that public road would basically incur additional costs. Additional marginal costs will start to go up as more and more additional users are coming in after the threshold value, after congestion. And this is also among the favorite reason why public roads to support, for instance, many economic models with regard to the construction, provision of charging road usage in terms of toll, in the case of Malaysia, for example. So since after the threshold N star, any additional users would basically cause additional costs. So then it would be more or less make sense, logical to transfer this charge to these additional users by charging toll rates. Okay, so hopefully those who are basically, then they will either decide not to use that road because of now it is being charged with a toll, or those who are only willing, who are basically their marginal benefit, the benefit from their point of view is higher than the amount that they are paying, would be willing to still pay and enjoy the benefit of less congested highways. Okay. And then we have some public goods can be charged because they can be excluded. For instance, the membership rights to private clubs. Some of these services, for instance, will also be made available in pure public goods, but it can also be charged and make more exclusive, as well as schools and hospitals, where in the case of Malaysia, for example, we have the public education, public school system, which is available more or less free of charge to all citizens. However, those who want to avoid congestion and want to get extra benefits and stuff, we also have private school system. So by using this price, you can somehow exclude others, the non-payers, from enjoying the same benefit. And the same goes with our healthcare system, where we have public hospitals which are available to everyone free of charge, for instance, more or less. And then we have a private hospital, which are available if with a price. And this can be individually consumed, and they are subject to exclusion. So the suppliers of this private school, private hospital, they have the right to exclude the non-payers from receiving their services. And this production and consumption, however, they should share, they will still produce, they will still generate externalities. With regard to schools and hospital, they will generate positive externalities, higher level of literacy in the society, for instance, and a higher quality of life, a higher health level in the society. And I'm just sharing this table just for us to have a brief glance with regard to the comparison between pure private goods, which we have already discussed a lot in microeconomics, and the price excludable public goods. Okay, and with regard to their means of production, so pure private goods are best to be left with the private firms, for instance, while the price excludable public goods, they can still be provided, okay, by both private firms as well as government, or private firm that receive this special contract or concession from the government. Now, with regard to the methods of distribution, basically pure private good would depends a lot on the market, while price excludable public good can still be distributed through the market, okay, by charging, as well as through the government as well. But it would be difficult. So that's why many of these price excludable public goods would be basically handled by private firms or private firms which are appointed by the government. Now, with regard to the methods of finance, since these goods can be charged, so usually they are financed mostly by the revenue from the sales, and some portion will still be financed by taxes, even private. For instance, certain provision of this price excludable public goods, sometimes the providers may still require certain grants and certain support from the government. So examples are given there, and which we have discussed earlier. Okay, I won't go into much details, but it's just to give a kind of overall view, kind of a quick glance of the overall view of public finance with regard to different types of goods. Okay, and then we have semi-public goods. Okay, so the pure public and pure private, these are two extremes. In between, of course, we have varieties of goods which basically would have a difference in degrees with regard to the two characteristics that we have mentioned earlier, with regard to rivalry and the degree of excludability. All right, and this continuum can be best presented in the two-dimensional graph, okay, because these two characteristics are being used to define the two pure public goods as well as pure private goods, rivalry as well as excludability. So these two characteristics, we can use it and construct a two-dimensional kind of plane, and then we can allocate, we can analyze different goods, different services that are available in the market by looking at the degrees of excludability as well as degrees of rivalry. For instance, a pure public good would correspond to point B at the extreme lower end on the left side, point B, where there is 0 degree of excludability and 0 degree of rivalry. Now, this would basically correspond to a pure public good. As we move from point B, then basically the degrees of excludability and rivalry would lessen, would decrease. Education as a public good, this would be just using this as an example. It has the characteristic of a public good because it creates positive externalities, higher literacy rate and stuff. And the price to families are basically set at zero for public school, and it is fully funded by the government tax revenues. However, the idea that some citizens would purchase less than the efficient amount of education for their children if it were provided in a competitive market is behind the principle of free and compulsory public education. And this then would have the characteristic of a public good in that the government cannot guarantee that all children receive an equal amount of education. Now, this is the issue with education as a public good. That's why some parents, some families, for instance, would be willing to get a private education. So the demand for a private good, for instance, compared to, now we're gonna move on and look at how the demand of public good is being determined. Now, in microeconomics, how the pure private good demand is being determined, it is basically, as you can see, if we have three individual consumers in the market, person A, B, and C, and in this example, let's say it is the quantity of bread. At the price of $3 per bread, we can simply ask these three people how much quantities that they are willing to purchase, right? So person A, okay, $3. So person A would want to purchase one bread. Person B is willing to purchase two bread. While person C, let's say, is a bread lover, so he is willing to purchase three quantities of bread. So how would the market demand being determined? It is simply a horizontal sum of the quantities at the given price. So point E, the bolded blue line B, that will be the demand curve, the market demand curve, which is downward sloping. And I guess all of you have discussed this. We have derived this when we discuss microeconomics. So the equilibrium would happen when the supply curve intersect with the demand curve at point E. So in total at $3, basically the total quantity of bread being demanded would be 6. 3 from person C, 2 from person B, and 1 bread from person A. Okay, now that's very simple. Unfortunately, with regard to a public good, the case becomes a lot more complicated because the consumers must consume the same quantity of the good. If, let's say, we have, with regard to the security service, for instance, and we have those three people who are living in the same neighborhood, I mean, if we use the same bread example, we cannot then, make sure that, okay, for person A, 1 security guard will be available, person B, 2 guards, security police officer will be available, and person 3, a police officer will be available. It doesn't make sense to provide 6 police officers to safeguard the neighborhood. So that's why for a pure public good, all consumers can only consume the same quantity of the good. We cannot basically distinguish or differentiate. So when person 3 house is on fire, we send 3 firemen. I mean, that's impossible. Our person 1, only 1 fireman because he or she demand less, only 1 fireman. It doesn't make sense. So all of them must only consume the same quantity. And it cannot be divided into individual units. So that's why on the demand curve, the variables on the vertical axis would basically be the maximum amount that people are willing to pay. So it will no longer be price because we cannot use price to determine the demand and supply of public goods. So instead of charging price, we need to then ask each individual citizen, each individual household in the neighborhood or in the country on their willingness to pay for every unit of the pure public good. You can just imagine either a firework, because firework is another example of a public good, or security guard, or police officer, or fireman. Okay, the fire service, your safety service. So each of them, how much that they are willing to pay. Okay, so how would this be determined then? The demand, the market, the total demand, the social demand. We're going to use the term social for public good. So let's say, again, we have these 3 people, and let's assume the security guards will be an example of a public good that is available in this neighborhood. So in this neighborhood, we have 3 households, A, B, and C. Now, what we need to do is that we need to ask them, okay, if we can only provide 1 security guard, how much that each household is willing to pay? As you can see on the graph, basically household A, person A, regard security guard to be more valuable. So that's why she is willing to pay 300 for the first security guard. From 0 to 1, without any security guard, everyone is responsible for their own safety. So that's why when so it would be, everyone would love to have security guard. So we start with the first security guard. So we ask each of them how much that they are willing to pay. So person A 300, person B 250, and person C 200. So altogether these three, so rather than being a horizontal sum, it is now will be a vertical sum of the willingness to pay, the marginal benefit of each individual. And this would then give us $750, right? 300 versus 300 from A, 250 from B, and 200 from C. So altogether we have 750, Z represented by Z1. So Z1 basically represents the social demand, the total demand for the total demand for security guard, for one security guard, and the amount that the society altogether is willing to pay is 750. And the same goes as we move to the right. So the same concept of diminishing marginal benefit applies here. Once you already have one security guard, to add another security guard, usually the marginal utility would diminishes. Will start to diminish because we already have one. And to add more, that's why we have a downward sloping demand curve over here. So again, take note, we simply need to sum the individual marginal benefits at each quantity. So the social demand, the total demand for this public good would be a vertical sum of the amount, the marginal benefit, which correspond to their willingness to pay for every quantity of security guard. Now, if we are able to do that, then surely we will reach the efficient point, because the marginal social benefit, because we are able to ask every individual on their willingness, what would be their perceived benefits, the individual marginal benefits that they receive. So we sum them up, so that would give us the social benefit, the marginal social benefit, the total marginal benefit of every household, and that would then correspond to the marginal social cost. What will be the amount that we need to pay to get the exact quantity of security guard to be provided. Okay, so if we can do this, basically it would be pretty much efficient. The efficiency point would be achieved. Okay, now this is the numbers that correspond to the graph that I shared with you earlier on. As you can see, at different number of security guards, we can ask every individual, because preference of individuals are heterogeneous. Perhaps in this example, you can safely assume that person A is very rich. So that's why person A, she is willing to pay higher to get for security guards. For the first security guard, she is willing to pay 300. While person C, perhaps relatively, he has the lowest household income among these three people in the neighborhood. So that's why he is only willing to pay 200 for the first security guard. Now, with regard to the first security guard, if it is being provided, so the total amount that would be collected from each household, from the total amount collected would be 750, because this would correspond to their perceived individual marginal benefit. Okay, and as we move on to the right, as we increase the number of security guards, as you can see, the social total marginal benefit will start to decrease. Okay, so the efficient output would basically occur at point E, which correspond to 3 security guards per week. So let's say at this point, we can see that the social benefit will equals to the marginal social cost, right? When we have 3 guards, the 450 would be the marginal marginal social benefit, which correspond to the sum of individual marginal benefit. And I forgot to mention that, let's say in this case the price of this security guards would be 450. So at this point E, so this would be the equilibrium output, which is being determined not through the market but through this negotiation, where we have to so this is basically a political equilibrium. One example of political equilibrium, where the provision of public good cannot be provided through the market system, but instead it has to undergo a kind of a political process, where in this simple example, if there are only 3 households in that neighborhood, so we need to ask each of them of their willingness to pay. Now that involves that is what we regard as a political process. Now, of course, as society becomes more developed and stuff, where we become bigger and larger, we need to have a more advanced instruments to basically manage this decision making through the political process. So that's why we have election, we may have census, we may have surveys and stuff, just to get to solve to find what would be the equilibrium quantity. Now, any solution that is solved through this process, the political process, where each individual, okay, basically expose their willingness to pay, we call this equilibrium as the Lindahl equilibrium. It is a point where the voluntary contributions of every individual would be sufficient to cover the cost of the public good. Okay. All right. So with regard to this Lindahl equilibrium, the voluntary contribution and cost sharing, basically members of the community can pool their resources to enjoy public goods that they could not afford if they had to purchase them on their own in the market. I mean, if you go back to this example, I mean, for sure, you will see that basically there will be zero security guard that will be provided if the cost is 450. Because even the richest person A, for instance, is only willing to pay $300, the highest one is by person A. But that itself is not sufficient to hire the first security guard if the cost of the security guard is 450. So basically, there will be zero security guard. If we are to use the market system to solve this issue, then zero security guard will be provided, because none of them will be willing to pay individually. I mean, the amount that they are willing to pay individually is not even sufficient. So if they are to pool their resources together, negotiate and agree, if each of them would contribute whatever their willingness, their perceived benefit, then we're going to end up with 3 security guards, right? And this kind of arrangement will be workable in the small communities. Unfortunately, in larger communities, financing by these voluntary contributions may no longer be feasible because the high cost to coordinate this decision making, and also the issue of free riders, where people can simply underdeclare or simply not declare the benefit that they get from this certain amount of public goods, and because of that they will not pay at all. Now, this kind of concept, if you look back into the history of into our rich heritage of Islamic economics, it closely applies with regard to our voluntary contributions in terms of sadaqah, as well as our contribution in crowdfunding in the modern arrangement for the provision of certain goods and services, especially services in the society. Waqaf, for instance, where we simply throw it to the community and let everyone to simply contribute whatever amount that they are willing to contribute. And this will usually be applicable to public services in the society, which happened in the past as well. Everyone would simply contribute based on their willingness, voluntarily. And then once the amount is sufficient, then the public services, the institutions and stuff will be erected, right? And the service will be enjoyed by everyone in the community. So this is basically what we already have in our heritage, where the voluntary contributions due to the motivations, the promise of reward by Allah in Quran, and being really encouraged by the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, have been made, have been available in our community since the beginning of Islam, long time ago, right? And this would basically surely would have a big potential if we can really develop this, and because once we can get the willingness of people to benefit, to contribute, then this would surely lead to an efficient outcome. If people undeclare or underdeclare and stuff, this would lead to a less efficient outcome. This is just to share with you a little bit about the Lindahl equilibrium. So under the Lindahl equilibrium, again, it depends on the voluntary contribution. And this can only happen if the voluntary contribution by every individual member would equal to his or her marginal benefit of the public good at the efficient level of output. So basically, we need to assume under the Lindahl equilibrium, every individual would be honest, because we know that logically or rationally, people would tend to under-declare the benefit that they get, because if they are to reveal their actual benefit, then they would then know that the government may then increase the tax rate so that it corresponds to your willingness to pay. And some people who are willing to pay higher, in the previous example, person A, who is the richest, she is willing to pay more than her neighbors, right? 300 for the first security guard compared to 250 and 200. Unfortunately, this is something that is too ideal and difficult, unless perhaps in an ideal Islamic community where everyone have that spirit of sharing and also honest with themselves, and they would simply truly declare their marginal benefit from the public good. Okay, so let's just move on. I will not spend too much time. This is what I have mentioned earlier with regard to the Lindahl equilibrium. We really need to have that kind of honesty and the spirit of to share. Those who have extra would be willing to pay more, higher than their neighbors and friends. Okay. Free rider problem. Basically, this is a problem that would hinder the Lindahl equilibrium. So free riders basically refers to individual who seeks to enjoy the benefit without contributing anything to the cost of financing. This strategy almost guarantee that basically the equilibrium amount of a pure public good would not be efficient. Instead, it would be lower than the efficient amount, and it become more severe in larger groups. Where free riders reason that their contribution is less likely to be needed or missed. What's the purpose of me going back now that, for instance, Malaysia facing the general election? If I were to go back, it's only one vote. It will not really make much difference. Something like that. I mean, more or less that would also fall. But if this party wins, or if this kind of policy being implemented, for sure I would also want to get benefit from this policy. That's just to share with you why the free rider problem become more severe in the bigger group, and also because of the enforcement problem, right? To get people to really declare their benefit. Lindahl equilibrium, example of this contribution, just to share with you with regard to the operation Desert Shield and Desert Storm, with regard to how this among the very few available examples, certain countries in the international arena, their willingness to contribute the cost of certain activities. Okay, now how to address this issue of free riders? Usually we can, rather than asking everyone to voluntarily pay tax to contribute, then what we can resort to compulsory finance. Compulsory finance, where we either impose tax to everyone, or then ask them to pay if they want to get these services. If they want to attend a private schools and stuff, want to use a private road, highways and stuff, or postal services, they need to pay for it. If they don't pay, they would be denied from getting the services. And then one may then decide how to vote by comparing the tax share, okay, of a public good with the marginal benefit at the proposed output. So through the compulsory finance, because the government would now require everyone to pay this tax, so every individual would then have to vote. They will basically compare what is their share of tax that they need to pay and the marginal benefit. And by doing this activity, then we can somehow infer what will be the individual willingness, the one which is the ideal situation, which is now impossible to be achieved, to this situation based on their willingness, based on their voting pattern. Right. Now, we are done with the demand part. So let's move on to how to check how this political equilibrium are being determined. We're going to look at the intersection between demand and supply. So compared to the market system, the political equilibrium would be determined through a public choice, through the political process. And this political interaction would basically follow the established rules in the constitutions, in the customs, and etc. So political equilibrium, rather than the market equilibrium for private goods, for public goods, the political equilibrium refers to the agreement on the level of production of one or more public goods, the quantity of public goods, given according to the specified rule for making the collective choice, called constitution, law and stuff, and the distribution of tax shares among individuals. So tax shares basically refer to the pre-announced levies assigned to citizens and equal to the portion of the unit cost of the public good proposed to be provided by the government. Okay. So we're going to assume, so the political process, basically in many countries in the world, the provision of public goods through government policies, healthcare budget and stuff are being determined through elections and voting in countries that practice democracies and stuff. So we're going to simply assume that people will evaluate the government goods in the same way as market goods, where they're going to basically compare their marginal benefit in terms of the benefit that they will be able to enjoy from this good compared to the tax share. The marginal cost will be in terms of the tax share, how much tax that they have to pay individually in order to get those goods, the public goods, to be provided. And then they will vote in favor of a proposal only if they are made better off. So we're going to also assume that the voters are rational in their decision. They will only vote yes, agree, if they can be made better off if the law is passed, if the policy is passed. So the most preferred political outcome would be basically the quantity of government supplied good that correspond to the point at which the person's tax share, marginal cost, basically, in the market system, will exactly equal to the marginal benefit of the good. All right. So this is just to illustrate. It would be similar to the private goods. It's just that the marginal benefit is similar to the private good in the market system, where it is downward sloping. For any public goods, the marginal benefit that you get from the provision of the public good will be diminishing. However, with regard to the marginal cost, the tax per unit of output would be constant. So let's say at this point, it is TI, the TI. Now, we simply need to get the intersection between the tax per unit of output and marginal benefit. And in this hypothetical example, the political equilibrium would be achieved at point Z, where Q star would be the output per year of that public good. Okay. Unfortunately, elections and voting may not really represent the social, the efficient outcome again. So we thought that previously Lindahl equilibrium, voluntary contributions is ideal, but unfortunately, because of the problem of free riders, we want to do compulsory finance. Compulsory finance, basically the laws and stuff would be the solution proposed would be through elections and voting. Unfortunately, elections and voting have its own issues. Citizens choose not to vote because when the cost of time and effort to go to vote outweigh the perceived benefit, perhaps, and then they believe that their votes do not make a difference, especially in a very big constituency. I mean, if you are only one out of 100,000 people in your constituency, these are all perceived belief. Why many citizens may choose not to vote, and they may see little or no difference between the available alternative. The available options in the manifestos are not that much different, or they may choose not to vote because they have scanty information. They are not really well informed. And in economics, in public finance, this refers to rational ignorance, where the lack of information about any public issues that result because the marginal cost to obtain the information exceed the apparent marginal benefits of doing so. Sometimes it gives more utility for individual to read entertainment news rather than to read or to really read these political policies and stuff. Okay. So now we have more or less covered demand and look at the political equilibrium. Let's have a look at the determinants of political equilibrium, how the political equilibrium, the provision of these public goods are being determined in the market. So we're going to follow the public choice rule, where the proportion of yes votes in relation to the number of votes required for approval of the issue. And we're going to also then look at the marginal, the average and marginal cost of the public good will also affect the political equilibrium. The third determinant, the third factor would be information, okay, to voters on the cost and benefit. If this law is passed, what will be the benefit that you get, and what will be the additional tax burden that you have to pay. And then the distribution of tax shares would also heavily influence the political equilibrium among the voters. If the younger generation are required to pay higher tax, then surely it would have an influence on the political equilibrium, which may, for instance, fall short of passing because we have a bigger number of younger voters. If certain laws, certain policy would basically put more tax burden on the younger voters, for instance, that it will surely affect the political equilibrium. And then the distribution of benefits among voters. So let's say certain policy would benefit the older generations more with regard to public healthcare and stuff. So surely the public, if the older voters would vote yes, it would surely affect the political equilibrium. There are many ways how the political equilibrium is being determined. Again, political equilibrium, we are referring to the quantity of public goods being supplied and demanded, which correspond to the market equilibrium, the quantity, as well as the tax share. Rather than price equilibrium, we are referring to tax. In this, among the simplest, the most simple way how to determine political equilibrium is through a majority rule. We just throw out the proposal to the society and let everyone vote, where the citizen must decide on the quantity of a pure public good to produce. Now, given the average cost, let's say we know the average cost of producing the good, you can assume that it can be a public safety security service. The tax share scheme has to be announced. So if we employ 10, let's say, police officers, so how much is the tax share for everyone in the neighborhood? If we increase it, if we have 15 police officers, how much? And now, if the good can be produced under the condition of constant cost, and there are n individuals in the community, so basically each individual would be required compulsory tax to pay a tax equal to the exact share, the total, the average cost divided by n per unit of the public good. Okay. Now, this is again an example of the security guards per week in this neighborhood. Now we have A, B, C, M, F, G, H. These are the number of voters that are available in the society, and now we want to decide what will be the political equilibrium of security guards to be provided. And let's say the average cost, which equals to the marginal cost. For every one security guard, the average cost, which equals to the marginal cost, is $350. That's their salary that the society have to pay. Now, again, we have to refer to the individual marginal benefits of every household. Now, we are no longer going to ask them, basically, their willingness to pay. Lindal equilibrium will no longer work in this case because of the bigger number of people, bigger number of citizens in this neighborhood. Now, if we are to impose, to find the political equilibrium, if we are able to sum the social benefit of everyone, in this hypothetical example, we can see that basically the amount that every individual is willing to pay, the sum of this would equal when the 4 security guards are being provided at point E. Now, at point E, for 350, since there are 7 households in this example, so each of them would have to pay $50. Right? Because the average cost is 350 and there are 7 households. So each of them will have to pay a compulsory tax amount total $50. Okay. So $50 for 1 security guard. Since the political equilibrium here is 4 security guards, so 4 times 50. So the total amount of tax bill for each voter is $200. Okay. So this is basically, this table provides the corresponding data of the previous example, the previous graph, which is much more simple. So for instance, voter A has a very low marginal benefit. So he would only basically vote yes for 1 security guard and vote no for the others. While person H, perhaps she is the richest individual in this neighborhood, and she would basically vote yes for all the security guards because her benefit for even having 7 security guards would still be greater than her cost that she is willing. Perhaps she is the richest. So the results, if we put this to vote, you should also be able to see that when the majority would basically be achieved when only at 4 security guards. If we are to increase it to 5 security guards, then the motion would fail because the majority will start to vote no. Person M will start to vote no. Now, person M is special because person M basically is what we refer to as the median voter. Because if you go back to this graph, you should be able to see that person M here would be the one whose preference is achieved. right? At $50, person M basically individually, she is already willing to pay $50 to get for these 4 security guards. She is willing to, because her individual marginal benefit intersect with the marginal cost compared to the other voters. So person M basically would be the happiest voter because her individual aspiration, her individual dream is the one that is being decided by the society. So the median voter would be the one who's the most preferred outcome is the median. Okay, so this depends on the dispersion, the statistical distribution, the standard deviation variance. So it depends on the dispersion of the most preferred outcomes. If the greater the dispersion, then there would be more dissatisfaction. If they are much widespread, far away from the median voter, then surely there will be more dissatisfaction with the public choices under the majority rule, because they are extreme voters on both sides of the median, whose preferred outcome are not achieved, are not realized. So this kind of dissatisfaction is what we refer as the political externalities, which occur when voters do not obtain their most preferred outcomes given their tax shares. In the previous example, you can see that the political externalities would be the biggest for voter A as well as voter H, because voter A is only willing to get 1 security guard, but now he is obligated to pay for 4 security guards, which to him perhaps is, individually he doesn't need 4 security guards. And person H, similarly, who is willing to get more security guards, so perhaps to her point of view, 4 security guards is insufficient. But since we are following the constitution of this society, so only the 4 security guards would be achieved through the voting system, right? And then we have another concept, political transaction cost, which measure the value of time, effort, and other resources expended to reach and enforce a collective agreement through this election. I won't go into much details. There will be many other voting systems. There are many other ways of achieving, but which will be discussed in more details in public finance costs, in public economic causes, how political equilibrium can be achieved under different systems. There will be, and also the different techniques. Sometimes the things which are least preferred, if you can log roll or if you can bundle it together in a policy, as well as certain lobbyist group. If you look back in the lobbyist group, these are most of the time they are minorities in the societies. So it is interesting to see how a small group of people with their own interests, which are only relevant to their group of people, somehow manage to influence the political decision and make it spread the burden to be responsible to make sure the policy is being enacted to everyone else who do not necessarily share the same belief or the same philosophy with this group of people. So other techniques would include to form political parties where individuals with similar ideas would then work together and encourage vote trading among voters. I mean, if you vote this, certain political party may say, if you agree to vote for our candidate in this area, we will vote for you in your area. If you vote yes to this policy, later on when you come up with this policy, we will support you. Okay. So these are all basically work in line with rational vote maximizing objective of the political parties. This is just to share with you in the political parties, when we have more voters, again, through the simple majority system, the median voter would basically be the one that have his most preferred outcome would be achieved. As you can see in the graph, perhaps you can assume that the extreme left or right would be the staunch supporter or staunch opposition of the party. So in this kind of setting, under the public choice theory, that's why many political parties, they would go to and try to satisfy the median voter, because for their staunch supporter, I mean, whatever that they do, for instance, surely these people will continue to support them. as well as the opposition. There's no need to basically make the opposition to be happy, because for sure they will vote for their party. So what's important is that to get the to make sure the policies to derive the provision of these public goods and stuff that would more or less align with the median voter who are in the middle. Okay, so I won't talk too much on this. Again, it depends on the spread, the distribution of the this number of voters. So that's why usually the median voter will be the one that would determine what will be the political equilibrium. Okay, by taking the center position. All right, so next, the next part, now that we have already finished our discussion on the demand and supply of public goods and how the political equilibrium is being determined, let's move on to the other side of public finance, which is how would these public goods be funded? So they would fall under the responsibility of the government. Okay, so the method of finance proposed, previously we have already talked about the voluntary contribution by everyone, which is really applicable in Islamic economics in terms of waqaf, donation, sadaqah and stuff. And then we talk about compulsory finance, which is also have been applied in our history, Islamic history in the past with regard to the zakat. One way or another is an example of a compulsory tax with religious obligation. It is being paid to the government or to the SS and the amil, and then it will be redistributed to the asnaf, as well as other tax imposed by the government, the Muslim government in the past, compulsory finance. Now let's have a look into the impact of this different method of financing on efficiency, the economic impacts of these different financing methods. What are the financing methods available and what would be their impact? So this method of finance would affect many variables. For instance, the political equilibrium. I mean, asking people to simply contribute voluntarily and forcing them to pay the certain amount would surely affect the political equilibrium. And also, it will also affect the overall equilibrium and efficiency with which resources are employed in private uses. It will more or less distort the private sector, the market equilibrium, since when the government impose finance, for instance, when the household are required to pay tax, then they would have lesser income to spend on their private goods. So this is a form of distortion in the private sector. And also it affects the distribution of income, especially when the government transfer from the tax collected, for instance, from the rich and redistribute it to the poor. So it affects the distribution of income. Now let's have a look at these principles of taxation. Taxes are basically compulsory payment associated with certain activities. If you do that activity, then you have to pay taxes. Malaysians in the past, when we learn before independence, British, for instance, sometimes they used to charge us the life tax, head roll tax, because you are alive. So you do that activity, then you have to pay tax based on the number of head that you have. just giving you a light joke. So if you don't do the activity, then you don't have to pay tax. Now, the revenues from this taxation are then used to purchase inputs necessary to produce government supplied goods and services. So that's number one, the purpose of taxation, to provide these public goods. Number two is to redistribute the purchasing power among the citizens, to transfer income, for instance, from the rich to the poor, ideally. So the reallocation of resources from private to government use would happen in two steps. Number one, it would basically reduce the ability of individual household to command resources. And number two, it would then, since now the government have revenues that they collected, they can also bid for resources that are used. So rather than all the resources are being available to the private sector, now the private sector basically need to also compete with the public sector, the government, with regard to the bidding for the resources to provide these goods and services. We're gonna just define some terminologies that we use in public finance, because later on we're gonna refer to these terms in order to make the discussion more accurate or easier. So first of all, the first terminology is tax-based. So tax base basically refers to item or activity on which the tax is imposed. Sales tax, for instance. So sales is if you are involved, if you act, if you do a sale, then you are required to pay tax. So sales, total sales would be the tax base or income tax. If you receive an income, so that will be a tax base. Can either refer to item or activity. So the most commonly used economic tax bases, there are three. Income, if you receive an income, then that will be the base of your tax. Number two would be consumption. If you consume something, if you purchase something from the market, from the shop and stuff, then you are required to pay tax, consumption. And then we have wealth tax, real property, estate tax and stuff. So these are the three most commonly used economic tax bases. So from this tax basis, there are two more types that we can divide it into two types of tax from the tax base. First of all, the first category is general tax, where all components of the economic basis are taxed without any exemption. For instance, income tax. As long as you receive income from all sources, regardless whether it is from your employer or from your own entrepreneurship activity or from your parents and stuff, if you report it, then all of these would be taxable, general tax. Selective tax refer to tax which allow certain sources of the tax where the tax base is given exemptions and deductions. If you, for instance, you receive the income from zakat money, for instance, so that is not taxable. I'm just giving you a quick example. Excise tax is an example of selective tax. And then from tax base, we have tax rate structure. This is why this terminology, because later on we're going to discuss a little bit on different type of tax structure, the different nature of tax structure. So we have the average tax rate, very simple, average tax rate, which refers to the total tax paid divided by the value of the tax base. So a person with 100,000 income, for instance, and the let's say the income tax is 20%, so the person would pay 20,000 out of 100,000. So the average tax rate would be 20%. Okay, and then we have a second term, marginal tax rate. I guess all economists are already used to the term marginal. So this refers to the change, additional tax collected when the tax base are expanded or decreases. When the value of the tax base changes, how much total taxes paid would also change. So this would be the marginal tax rate. Okay. Now we're going to use those terms and look at different tax structure. Now, first of all, the most simple tax rate would be the proportional tax rate structure. This is also called the flat tax rate. The example that I mentioned to you, let's say the government simply imposed 20% income tax on all income level, regardless, $1 income to 100,000 income, the tax rate is 20%. Now, this 20%, basically the average tax rate, ATR, is fixed. It does not vary with the value of the tax base. So 20% flat tax. Okay. So at the next tax structure is what we call as progressive tax rate structure. Under the progressive tax rate structure, basically the average tax rate, ATR, will go up as the income, as the tax base. To make it easy, so let's just use income tax as the tax base. As the person receive more income, the average tax rate would also go up. It keep on increasing. And this is basically the practice of many countries in the world with regard to income tax. The government would impose different tax bracket for different levels of income. And usually the people with higher income would be required to pay a higher tax rate. So this would translate into increasing average tax rate for different tax bracket, for different tax income level. Okay, and the marginal tax rate will also go up, and it will exceed the average tax rate after a point. So the graph that you are seeing here, for instance, in this case, any individual with income lower than 4,000 would not be taxed, 0% tax imposed. And the first income tax rate bracket will be from $4,000 to $29,000. So people whose income are between 4,000 to 29,000, the tax rate that they need to pay would be 15%. 15%. The marginal tax rate is 15%. However, the average tax rate would be lower than 15%. We'll see how, because a person with 29,000 income, for instance, $29,000 income, first of all, we need to subtract 4,000, right? Because the first 4,000 is non-taxable, tax-free. Let's say 4,000 is the minimum wage or minimum amount needed for someone to survive. Maqasidu Sharia, for instance, the preservation of life. 4,000, let's say we have done 4,000 is the amount minimum needed for someone to survive. So anything below 4,000 are not taxable. So a person with 29,000, we subtract 4,000, so only 25,000 would be subjected to 15% tax rate, because the first 4,000 are not taxable. So because of that, 25,000 multiplied with 15%, so surely the average tax rate would be lower than the marginal tax rate. Okay. Now, this information, okay, you can look at this table. This table basically used to develop the graph that you see on the earlier slide. So under the progressive tax structure, okay, more or less, basically to make it simple, people with higher tax base, higher income would be required to pay higher tax rate. Okay. This is just to share with you the average tax rate by the developed nations, the OECD countries. So you can see that the Scandinavian countries, mostly the Scandinavian countries, basically they charge a very high average tax rate compared to other countries in the world. Because also we know that they are providing many of the public goods and services, right? While other countries, you can see some Asian countries that only made into this graph, such as Korea and what else? We have Korea, Turkey. So these countries are relatively lower, their average tax rate compared to the Scandinavian countries, right? And then a third type of tax rate structure is the opposite of progressive, where we have regressive tax rate structure. Okay, to make it simple, basically people with, if you make more income, higher tax base, you are required to pay lower. A lower tax rate is being enforced to you. And this is basically applicable in payroll taxes, for instance. Of course, this regressive tax rate structure, as you can see there, the ATR, the average tax rate, basically declines, okay, as the size, okay, of the tax base increases, as it increases. In this regressive, for instance, in this example, the regressive income tax may result in a lower annual average tax rate as income rises. There are some interesting issues that we may, just highlight here. So first of all, if you look at this structure, basically a more productive individuals, if you are more productive, then you get more income. And if you get more income, you are rewarded with lower tax rates. Okay, so this would be among others, the benefit of a regressive tax rate structure. It's not necessarily bad. I mean, the rich have to pay less. It may not necessarily be that bad. Just I'm not saying which one is right or wrong, but just to basically expand our views to consider multiple angles before we come up with any stand. However, of course, such a regressive tax rate structure is being opposed because it violates the general principle of that the ability to pay tax increases with income. Because usually the white held belief is that if you have more income, then you have a higher ability to pay. So you are supposed to pay more tax. However, even if we look at this regressive tax rate structure, basically the richer with regard, although they are paying a lower tax rate, but in dollar amount, you can see that actually they are paying more dollars compared to the lower income group. So this would usually be applied in payroll tax in countries that implement a social system based on pay as you go, such as the United States, because their social security over there is based on pay as you go system, unlike Malaysia and other countries where we are self-sufficient. I mean, everyone is expected to save under EPF for their own retirement. So it's not funded by the tax system, those who work in the private sector. All right. Now let's have a look at this distribution of the burden of government finance. We have looked at the different tax rate structure. Now we want to then decide, we want to look at how the burden of government finance are being distributed. So far, surely there will not be a single way. There is no rule of thumb or the best tips on how to distribute the cost of providing these public goods that will make everyone happy. Surely there will always be those at the extreme end of the far away from the median voter. We will always incur political externalities. Some people will always be not satisfied, will always be unhappy. However, regardless whether the citizens are happy or not, the government still need to implement it, to decide on how much the quantity of this public good to be provided. So these decisions, how to then distribute the burden, who should pay more, who should pay less, should everyone pay the same amount, and other thing, would basically be influenced by the philosophies that the society, the worldview of the society, the culture, and many, and then it will be developed into defined principles. In the current public finance, basically there are two major approaches. So where the distribution of this burden would depend on either we follow the benefit principle or the ability to pay principle. Of course, in Islamic economics, there have been a lot of discussions since our classical scholars with regard to the maslahah versus mafsadah, between individual benefit as well as social benefit, and whether the need, is it continuous or whether there is only a temporary, when the country, for instance, in the past, need to spend more on military spending to defend the country, then usually the rulers will have to consult the scholars and get their view whether additional new tax can be imposed on the citizen to finance the military spending in order to defend the country. So these will all have been richly discussed in our public finance scholars in the Siyasah Al-Shar'iyyah and many others, Al-Ahkam Al-Sultaniyah, as well as Kitabul Amwal by our great scholars of the past. In many of these, they will always basically give priority to the social welfare over individual welfare. If both policies basically give maslahah, we should always prioritize the one that would give a greater maslahah compared to the smaller maslahah. And if it is maslahah versus mafsadah, then surely mafsadah have to be evaded at all costs. Now let's have a look at this distribution, the principle used. So the first principle is the benefit principle. This is very much straightforward. It basically argues that those who benefit the more, those who get more benefit, then they should carry more burden of the government finance. If you get more benefit of the public good, then you should pay more tax. Okay, so these are basically the fees and the charges, ideal forms of government finance. Those who get the most benefit from this policy, they should pay more. More or less, it corresponds. It is very much similar to the market arrangement. If you get benefit from this good, then you have to pay more. Okay, so in this case, it is kind of an ideal arrangement where we would be able to link the cost of these government goods, government public goods, with the marginal benefits of those services that these individuals are enjoying. And this would then result in a Lindal equilibrium, where everyone would basically pay voluntarily the amounts that correspond to the benefit that they receive. Okay, and collectively, it will the collectively conceived benefits, unfortunately, is difficult to assign to individuals, because this, although it is ideal, You know, if you benefit the more, then you are expected to pay more tax. Unfortunately, it is very difficult to assign this benefit to individuals, and of course, it is also impossible due to the how would we then quantify or distinguish, make sure that people would simply be honest in declaring their benefits. So this the ideal benefit principle would be hindered by the problem of free riders and dishonesty in declaring the benefit. And the second principle that is used is with regard to ability to pay principle. In this principle, in this approach, basically we argue that taxes should be distributed according to the capacity of the payers to pay them. So it is independent of the benefit, whether you use that service or not. As long as you are able to pay, then you are expected to pay tax. Okay. So there are, if countries, governments that follow this principle, basically they would strive to achieve horizontal equity, where this horizontal equity basically refers to the situation where those citizens with the same economic capacity, people with the same level of income, for instance, will say the same amount of taxes. Okay, and then we have another concept of vertical equity. Now, vertical equity refers to the situation when those of differing economic ability would pay tax that differ according to some collectively chosen notion of fairness. So this will also be heavily influenced by the philosophies that the society subscribe to. Now, unfortunately, again, both concepts are basically subjective. It's open to debate, open to argument. It is heavily influenced, value loaded. To some may say that, you know, government providing, for instance, maintenance or taking care of stray animals and stuff, what would be the benefit of it? Might be subjective. It depends on the worldview. And also it is difficult to administer. How to make sure that people honestly report their ability. And in Islamic economics, we could see that many of these issues, the option offered to address this issue would then come back to a stronger spiritual morality character of individuals, such that we have to be honest. I mean, we have been always motivated, encouraged by the revelation to be honest and be volunteer to pay more if we have the ability to help the spirit of cooperation and brotherhood. Okay. So now let's move on with regard to evaluating the government finance method. So the system of government finance basically would make trade-off among normative criteria. So there are three major criteria that are usually being considered. The first one would be equity. So usually with regard to this, which tax system, which tax structure, should we tax the rich more than the poor? Or should we impose the regressive tax rate and stuff? So what are the criteria being used? So the first one is equity. It should basically align with the commonly held notions of fairness and ability to pay. Secondly, the second criteria will be efficiency. Basically, raising tax should result in minimal loss in efficiency, because we know that tax is a form of government intervention, similarly to subsidy, which distort the market. However, these activities should result in a minimal level of loss in efficiency to the private sector. And finally, the administrative ease. The amount, the tax system should be easy to administer without excessive cost to collect, to enforce, to comply with taxes and tax laws. I mean, now that the government want to collect taxes, and let's say if the tax form is so complicated, so it would surely defeat the purpose. Many people would then be reluctant to really fill up the form honestly, because it is too difficult and too complicated. So that's why administrative ease would be the third factor that would be that would influence the government financing methods. Okay. Now this is just to have a look at this possible conflicts between these criteria, because equity and efficiency sometimes, most of the times, they may not be aligned. They may move in the opposite direction. Now, we know that the main function of government finance is to reallocate resources from private to government use. The most efficient means raises level of revenue. Of course, the most efficient means would make the government to be able to maximize their revenue and minimize loss in the well-being from market production and exchange. However, the goals of efficiency and equity in distribution of taxes are likely to conflict. So there will always be a trade-off between equitable and efficient system, and this can only be resolved through political interaction. So usually many countries in the world would simply throw it to the people to then decide what would be the trade-off, whether they want to be more towards more towards inclined towards equity more than efficient, or the other way around. So democratic tax system, for instance, among other, to address this issue, they would be full of exemptions and deductions for particular groups in order to provide rooms for equity to achieve more the equity goal. Okay. With regard to ease of administrative, the third factor, this would have a very big impact on tax compliance and evasion. Okay, so tax evasion, these two are basically different. Tax evasion is illegal because it is a form of non-compliance with tax laws by failing to pay taxes that are due. The greater the non-compliance, the higher the tax rate necessary to raise the revenue. I mean, now, if we all of us here, we basically have to wear the government hat. So of course, we want to maximize our tax collection. So tax evasion is something that would reduce our tax collection. So that's why this is it is illegal. If there is a greater non-compliance in the society, then the government would have to raise more taxes to get the sufficient amount of revenue to provide the public goods. And another bad thing is that the good people would be penalized. The honest taxpayers are basically forced to pay higher taxes so that the sufficient amount of public goods would be provided. Small group of people that evade tax, these more or less bad taxpayers, but then who are being penalized more? The honest taxpayers. So this is something that the government would want to avoid. Another concept that we have is tax avoidance. This is basically, this is legal because it basically it leads to a change in behavior to reduce tax liability. For instance, if the government introduced import car tax, then rather than buying an imported car, then the individual may simply change his or her behavior and purchase a locally produced car. So there's nothing wrong with that. It is not illegal, but maybe socially wasteful. Okay, because if the person, for instance, really prefer to use an imported car, but she has to basically distort and change her behavior and go for a locally produced car. So it is more or less socially wasteful because the person is being hindered from achieving her ideal utility level. Okay. To reduce the tax evasion, for instance, there are several ways, okay, how to reduce tax evasion. I'll just make the discussion a bit more simple. So the first approach, for instance, is to reduce the marginal tax rate by making the tax to be cheaper. Right? When tax is cheap, then perhaps when the individual compare, if I were to evade tax, then I have to pay a higher penalty. But since the tax rate is very low, why not I'll just pay the lower tax rate? Right? So that is one way how to reduce tax evasion. Another method, the stick method. Previously it was the carrot method. Now it is the stick method, where the government may increase the punishment, the sentence for by increasing the marginal cost. As you can see, that so that may again motivate someone, to simply honestly comply with the tax law. Okay. Beside tax, of course, another option, another source of fund available to finance government expenditures would be through borrowing, where the government would basically borrow from the public by issuing instruments, by issuing these instruments. And debt are usually the main rule of thumb in public finance is that government should borrow to finance development expenditure, but not operational expenditure. Right? It is often used to finance capital expenditures due to the greater benefit that accrue in the future. All right. I won't go into much detail because we are almost at the end of the session. Okay, so again, donations, other, well, government-induced inflation, this basically refers to, these are all alternative. Beside tax, government can either borrow or government can induce inflation. In other words, this is referring to increasing the supply of money, increasing money supply. To make it simple, as if that government print more money to finance their expenditure. This would then induce inflation. And government can also resort to donations, get the crowdfunding, or like if Malaysians, for instance, after general election 14, there was a crowdfunding donations to help the government to repay certain taxes, right? And this also usually come when we want to provide aids to victims of natural disasters and many other things. Next option, next alternative, beside tax, would be user charges. So the government may also impose price to certain services that it provides. If you want to get, if you want to renew your car license, for instance, or we want to use road and stuff, user charges. These user charges for government provided goods and services. Okay. Okay. And finally, government may also engage in their own enterprise. They may sell private goods and services to reduce revenues and reduce reliance on taxes. Right. The last part of the discussion today, we're just gonna basically have a look at this public financial instruments, taxation, and their impact on efficiency and distribution of income. Previously, we have already talked about the proportional tax, the flat tax. So we're gonna start with the lump sum taxes. Okay, so lump sum taxes basically is independent of the tax base. It is required to pay each year, regardless of your income level, whether you consume or not, or what your wealth is. Right? This can be more or less in Islamic economics. For instance, we can refer this to Zakatul Fitr. It has that it share many characteristics with lump sum taxes. Of course, it reduces the ability of consumers to purchase the private goods, and force those taxes to reduce either consumption, saving, or investment without distorting the prices. Head tax that I mentioned earlier would require all adults to pay equal amount each year to governing authorities. So that's why I mentioned Zakatul Fitr have a lot of similar characteristics with lump sum taxes. And then we have price distorting taxes. Now, price distorting taxes, different than the lump sum tax, it will basically distort price. It will distort price. We can use the indifference curve analysis that we have discussed in the microeconomics to compare the effect of lump sum tax and price distorting tax. Let's say both taxes achieve the same goal to the government, collecting the same amount. Okay, and we should be able to see that the price distorting tax would lead to excess burden of tax that would result in the loss in well-being. Okay. So this graph looks a bit complicated. I won't go into much detail. You can see here that the lump sum tax. So again, remember, have in mind that the goal of the government is to collect the same amount of tax. And now let's say there are two options. The government can either impose a lump sum tax or an income tax or a sales tax, on this, let's say gasoline, tax on gasoline. So the imposition, okay, of this lump sum tax would collect T, the amount of T tax, as you can see, the difference between YT and Y star from a person that would allow the person to attain a higher level of well-being than a price distorting tax that collect the same amount. Now look at U1 and U2. U1 and U2, so this refers to the indifference curves, two indifference curves of the same individual, okay, who are being charged different types of tax. Now U2 would basically be the person, the person's indifference curve, okay, when she, okay, is being charged a lump sum tax, where she would end up at a higher indifference curve at U2. Unfortunately, when this price distorted, the loss in well-being due to the the imposition, okay, of this sales tax of gasoline. Unit tax is an example of a price distorting tax, would basically lead to the person to have a lower indifference curve, right? Okay. I won't go into much details because we are already at the end of the session. So I guess I'll end here. I won't go into all these much technical details. So now I will basically give it back to Dr. Zera.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Irwan, for the very insightful and informative lecture. It's very detailed explanation and a good revision for me on public finance. I just open up the chat box. If you have any question, you can put it there. All right. Meanwhile, you can also ask question in YouTube or Facebook. I'll read that, inshallah. So while waiting for some question on Zoom, I will read one simple question from YouTube, Dr. Irwan. It's just, I think this participant is just would like to clarify on the term used. Is there anything called government finance? I only know there's budget for the country.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. That's question is just a very kind of a terminology's usage in public finance, where we use the term government finance to refer to the source of finance available to the government. While budget, basically, this would refer to both how the government plan, the costing part, as well as the expenditure part. From how would then the government spend the amount of their revenue on different sectors, on development budget, budget, as well as operational budget. So in public finance, we use the term government finance to refer to these different options, right? I mentioned earlier, we have tax, we have printing of money, we have borrowing, we have government businesses and stuff. So these are different ways how a government can raise its revenue. So that's what we mean when we mention to government finance. How would the sources of financing available to government?
All right, thank you for your response, Dr. Irwan. The second question is that, Assalamualaikum, sir, your idea of idealism is close to communism. Isn't that against Islam?
I'm not sure how does the discussion somehow relate to communism. I mean, if we refer what I mentioned earlier, the ideal situation basically refers to the Lindal equilibrium, where everyone contribute voluntarily based on the benefit that they have, that they enjoy. I mean, if you think that you are receiving more benefit than others and you have more ability, just thinking out loud from the Lindal concept of equilibrium, where we assume that everyone gonna be honest and simply voluntarily contribute without being forced. So to me, that is no way similar to communism, because we are helping the society, the government, the society, according to our own calculated benefits, calculated voluntarism. If we want to contribute more, then we would pay more. And also the second place where I mentioned about idealism, which refers to the benefit principle. Like ideally, if you are the one that receive most benefit from this provision of a public road in front of your house, then of course you are expected to pay more because you use the road more often than perhaps your neighbor who are only using a bicycle, right? I mean, using a bicycle doesn't need a big road and stuff. So the benefit principle ideally basically asks everyone, if you receive more benefit, then you are expected to pay more. Just that I'm sorry, but I do not see how that kind of I mentioned ideal situations in both issues are somehow related to communism. Sorry about that.
Thank you for your response, Dr. Irwan. I think if the participant needs more explanation, you can reach Dr. Irwan personally and explain what you mean by that. later. All right, thank you. Let's take the third question. Very many thanks, Doctor, for your lecture. Is regressive tax structure with all its benefits Sharia compliance?
MashaAllah, this is a very difficult question. I'm not the, I mean, what we have basically discussed this morning, what I have shared this morning is a very, basic kind of concept, different tax structures and stuff. To me, just to kind of give an overall picture, we need to then look at the impact. I mean, all these tax structures, either a proportional or progressive or regressive, they are neutral. These are simply, mechanism, different ways how we can use in order to achieve a certain objective to raise government revenues. Now, whether they are Sharia compliant or not, I think we need to get additional information with regard to the first of all, the objective. What's the original goal? Why is there a need for government to raise additional tax? For what purpose? And then we need to look at the implementation. That regressive tax that is being proposed, how would then it be implemented? What will be the impact on the people's welfare? Will it really hurt certain segments in the society more than the others? That's why I mentioned that many countries in the world will simply basically throw it out during the election. Let the people vote. Let the people decide. And this also reminds me of many of our classical scholars in Siyasa al-Shar'iyya, in Al-Ahkam al-Sultaniyya, when they talk about the rulers, the governments, the Muslim governments, usually the heritage, the revelation, tend to emphasize more on maslahah versus mafsadah rather than achieving the ideal justice. Because we know in public finance, it is impossible for any sultan or any president or any prime minister to make everyone happy, to make everyone feel and believe that, yes, my leader is very fair and just. We may feel it individually, but of course, others were affected, like in the example of the security guards. A person who is, feel that, no, this is unfair. To me, I'm poor, I don't need that much security services. Why am I being charged to pay a lot? So that's remind me, perhaps, why in the discussion of our scholars in the past, when it comes to the leaders and stuff, they stress a lot more on maslahah. As long as any public policies implemented by the rulers, if it gave more benefit, greater welfare to the bigger segment of the society, and smaller people would more or less receive the political externalities, the political cost, then hopefully Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will still forgive them and consider that to be a kind of their good action, their good deeds. So that's just my sharing lah. So we need to get more information, because these are simply tools. So it depends on how we implement them. So we have to make sure that at least majority of the people are happy with that decision. So when majority of people are happy with that decision, hopefully Allah will then forgive all the shortcomings of that policy. So that would be my take, Dr. Zira, for that question.
Thank you for your insight, Dr. Irwan. This could be a continuation from that question from another participant. From Rizky Mujizat. Okay. Can zakat be used instead of tax? Because many scholars forbid taxes. What do you think about this?
Many scholars, again, Dr. Zira, the last part
okay,
of
the participant has two questions. First is that can zakat be used instead of tax? And then he said many scholars forbid taxes. What do you think about that?
Many scholars forbid taxes. I'm not really. I don't think I will agree with that statement because again, taxes. I mean, even during the times of the great companions, the Khulafa ar-Rashidun. I mean, there have been taxes being imposed on the people. So I'm not sure how. Maybe the question is referring to specific types of tax. But perhaps that's why. He or she is mentioning that that kind of tax is prohibited by the scholars. It's just that if and also perhaps because of the practice in the past, the scholars, our classical scholars, only allow the rulers, the government, to collect taxes when there is a need. They are not allowed to basically continuously collecting taxes when the need is not there. Something like that, a general kind of a tax imposed on everyone. So going back to the first part of the question, can we use zakat to replace tax? I think this is a very good question. It has been discussed a lot in the literature, where it's just that contemporarily, currently, I found that there are two kind of opinions among our modern Muslim economists. One group tend to regard zakat as social finance, where it is optional to basically more kind of a third sector philanthropies, to be used for that kind of purpose. But then there are another group of scholars who tend to view, no, zakat is actually similar to tax because it is obligatory. Once you have fulfilled the conditions, similar to tax, once you have reached the threshold, once you have, fulfilled the time and stuff, then you are required through the religious law to pay tax. And this tax, zakat, for instance, the beneficiary have been specified. Okay, so of course, when we talk about remember earlier on, the goal of government financing, they are either to provide public goods or to transfer income, to redistribute income. So surely the redistribution of income, okay, through zakat, since the beneficiaries, the asnaf, have been specified, would be able to realize the second goal of public finance, the tax money, where we want to redistribute income. We want to transfer income from a certain group of people in the society, zakat collected from those who have fulfilled the criteria, let's say to make it simple, from the rich, and then we redistribute them, transfer the purchasing power to the less privileged, to the poor and the remaining asnaf in the society. So to me, if we have that kind of goal, specific goal that we want to realize, to redistribute income, then surely zakat can be used to replace tax, to redistribute, to transfer this purchasing power from those who are able to pay tax to those recipients of tax.
All right, thank you, Dr. Irwan. Okay, given time, I will take one last question from the floor. It's from Zoom. I think this is from a Malaysian, Jamalia Jamil. Okay, Salam speaker, is there any concrete measurement policy that our current government can effectively implement to curb deficit, market price hikes due to global recession announcing by the IMF recently?
So the question is about, Dr. Zera, can you please repeat the...
Is there any concrete measurement policy that our current government can effectively implement to curb deficit, market price hikes due to global recession announcing by IMF recently?
Okay, it's just that I'm sorry, I'm a bit confused because the question asks about measurement and then asking how we can curb the deficit. So to me, these are two different ways. So the first part of the question is asking for measurement, unit of measurement. What would be the best way how we can measure the government deficits and stuff. So the government deficit is basically being, simply stated, would be the amount of the extra spending which are not sufficient to the revenue. Now, perhaps besides looking at that, a better measurement would be to also look at the subdivision. We need to look into more details. Those deficits, they are coming from what source? Okay, so if those deficits are coming due to borrowing, for instance, so we need to then know whether the borrowing happened, would come, the extra expenditure will be financed by borrowing, for example. And if this, deficit, first of all, if they are coming from the development expenditure, development expenditure usually would be fine. It doesn't really trigger any alarm and stuff. But if that deficit were to come from operational budget, and then we should trigger an alarm because the government is not doing well in financing its budget. So if the deficit come due to extra spending for future development projects that will benefit for in the future, where the benefit going to accrue to even the next generation and stuff, then that should be okay. Okay, and then another thing, maybe we can look at where the government propose the potential source of financing this. Let's say they are deciding to print money. Of course, it will be dangerous. Let's say they want to borrow. Now, this borrowing, then we need to look, okay, from where that they plan to borrow. Are they plan to borrow from external sources or from internal domestic sources, right? So domestic sources would be usually less exposed to the exchange rate volatility, for instance. So that would be my take on the first part. Second part, to curb this deficit, again, there is no right or wrong in public finance. We have to then give it back to the society. If in the case of Malaysia, the parliamentarians, if they vote and they agree to increase the threshold, because they represent the public, the public opinion in the parliaments, whether it is really ideally or not, but that's the system that we have. So again, going back to public finance, there is no right or wrong. It goes back to the majority. I mean, if the public believe, if more people believe that the government should should reduce their deficit, perhaps then we can need to take action and see how the government can reduce. Mostly cited right at the moment is to basically correct the leakages in the form of corruptions. We did not talk about corruptions, but corruptions are among the major source of leakages that distort the political equilibrium. So if we are able to address that, I'm just giving one example, a corruption issue, perhaps that would help us to curb the deficit in our budget that we are suffering at the moment. So that's all from me, Dr. Zera.
Okay, thank you so much for a very, very clear explanation. As I scroll down, I can see more good questions, but I'm sorry that we can't take it in this live session. But as I always say, inshallah, Dr. Irwan is available and ready to answer your question through his personal email shared in the brochure. Correct me if I'm wrong, it's irwan@iium.edu.my. Okay, so copy all your questions and send to his email. Inshallah, he'll be answering to your questions. Right. So with that, we thank you, Dr. Irwan, for your effort and your time. Managed to slot in some times for us despite your busy schedule. So dear our participant, this is our 11th week. Inshallah, next week will be our last class. For certificate in Islamic economics, we have 12 classes altogether. So next week will be our 12th class and the final class for the program. So I really look forward to seeing you. You are about to graduate in certificate in Islamic economics. So stay tuned. Hope to see you next week, inshallah. Thanks once again, all the participants, and thanks again, Dr. Irwan.
You're welcome. Assalamualaikum.
Assalamualaikum. See you next week, inshallah.